debate just days now before the Ontario election. And it's going to be an interesting one, and it could change people's minds. Eric, let's just tackle a couple things that the gentleman said before the break, and we only have a very short period of time. But is there a path here for the NDP to steal support from the Progressive Conservatives? What is the floor or ceiling for Doug Ford? Is there one? And where else could Kathleen Wynne, I guess, pick up some support in this last week or so?
Well, the New Democrats have been picking up some support from the PCs, whether they are people who are traditionally PC or were just parking their vote with the PCs looking for a change of government. That's harder to say. But they are starting to get some from the PCs, which was not the case at the beginning of the campaign, that the most of the NDP gains were coming at the expense of the Liberals. Now, for the Conservatives, what would their floor be? Well, you'd probably look at the performances of Tim Hudak over the last two elections, so 31, 35%, something like that. We're starting to see some polls showing that the PCs could be that low. And for the Liberals, if they can make the case that the New Democrats aren't ready for government, then maybe they might be able to get some of the voters that they lost, but they might also be able to get some of the people who have voted for the Liberals in recent campaigns and are now saying they would vote for the PCs. That might be one place where they could still get a little bit of more support as this campaign reaches its final days.
Rob, is there anything that a leader can do in the face of a desire for change? Is it possible to pull it back, or is that just overwhelmingly difficult to fight against?
It's tough, especially when you've been in power for 15 years. Look, the voters are never wrong. What you need to be able to do is show that you as a government, you as a political party, are also change, that you're an activist government, that you're not a tired government. I think that's what the Liberals at Queen's Park have tried to do. They have been an extraordinarily activist government. Whether it's enough to convince voters that they represent change or that it's not time for change is a bit of rolling a boulder uphill. I'm not going to lie to you about that, Rosie. Why would I come out on TV and lie to you right now?
Yeah, that's well, good. I appreciate that. There's a hard road ahead, and I think they understand that, Chad. But there is, to your point, I think challenges though for Doug Ford too. There are questions around problems with votes and showing that he is capable of being a premier, which is different than what he's been lately. We may have to end here in 30 seconds, so 10 seconds to you, Chad.
Doug Ford's got to show tonight that he's got a real plan. His voters are the most enthusiastic of any of the three parties, and he's got to get them to the polls on June 7th, show real value for how gas prices and taxes and other meaningful things are going to benefit folks if he's elected.
Well, that's what someone, and I'll give you 10 seconds too, Brad. Someone suggested to me that the voter machinery around the NDP may not be as strong as the Conservatives in terms of getting out the vote. Is there any truth to that from your perspective?
No, I wouldn't concern myself with that. If these trend lines continue that you were just showing on the graph, I mean, what the riding polls that are in the public domain are showing us right now is that the Liberals are losing almost everywhere in this province. We're debating over traditional seats. Those will go NDP.
I got to let you go. Sorry. Brad, Chad, Rob, and Eric will be back after the debate. The debate lasts 90 minutes until 8 p.m. No commercial breaks. We'll be back on the other side of it with more special coverage. You're watching CBC News Network.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Paikin, and welcome to the 2018 Ontario Election Leaders Debate.
Good evening. I'm Farah Nasser. Steve and I will be your moderators today. And we should tell you that all the parties have agreed to the format, they've all agreed to the rules, and the speaking order has been decided by a draw.
And with that, let's introduce the leaders to you. They are Kathleen Wynne, the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, the Progressive Conservative Party leader, Doug Ford, and the New Democratic Party leader, Andrea Horwath.
We are going to begin tonight with opening statements. Doug Ford, please start us off.
Well, thank you very much for having us. My friends, you know me. I'm for the little guy. I'm for the people. I'm here to tell you the PC plan, a plan to clean up the hydro mess and reduce your hydro rates by 12%, a plan to put money back into your pocket instead of the government's pocket by reducing your income tax by 20%, making sure that we reduce gasoline tax by 10 cents a liter. My plan is to create great paying jobs and nobody will be laid off. Our plan is to reduce and get rid of hallway health care. My plan is to bring honesty, integrity, and transparency back to the government. You don't have to choose between bad when it comes to the Liberals or 10 times worse when it comes to the NDP. Our government is for the people, and a new day will dawn in Ontario, a day of opportunity, prosperity, and growth.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. That is your time. I will turn it over to Ms. Horwath next. Ms. Horwath.
There's something special happening in Ontario, and everywhere I go, I can feel it. People are saying that things are going to change and that they want to see something different for the future. People are saying that they don't want to see the same old solutions from government. They know that we can have change that makes people's lives better. We don't have to accept what's been happening. We don't have to go from bad to worse. We can end hallway medicine in our province. We can make sure that every child has the education that they need. We can do so much better, and we can do that together. You know what? It doesn't have to be the way it is in this province. And I know that together we can make change that makes people's lives better. I'm confident that we can do that together on June 7th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Horwath. Once again, audience, I'd ask that you restrain your reactions. We're trying to get this moving and for people to get the most out of this debate, so I will ask you please to refrain from your applause. Ms. Wynne, you're next.
Thank you very much. Government isn't about winning power. It's about using the power that you're given to make a lasting difference in people's lives. And my opponents love to talk about my record, and so do I. So here's what I want to say about the last 5 years. Sorry, not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario to make life better. I'm not sorry that we're covering tuition for 235,000 students. I'm not sorry that we're protecting the environment. And I'm really not sorry that we're no longer asking single moms to raise a family on $11.40 an hour. We've created nearly 1 million jobs, and we've got a plan for better hospital care, better home care, and better child care that builds on that success. I'm not sorry that we're making an economy that works for everyone, not just for a few.
Thank you, Kathleen Wynne, for the opening statement. Okay. Okay, everybody, we let everybody get away with applause for the opening statements, but let's really focus now on the debate. We're breaking this up into 3 segments this evening, doing something a little bit different. For the first segment, which we're about to go into now, Farah and I are going to ask a few questions. These questions have been chosen by a panel of journalists, the broadcasters producing this debate, and the first question is about trust. And Doug Ford, you get the chance to answer this question first. Trust in politicians, as we all know these days, is rather low. Why should voters trust you?
Well, let me tell you, Steve, and I'm going to tell the people at home, every day I have to make decisions for a couple hundred families at our company. And every decision I make, I have to make sure it's the right decision. I have to make the right decision when we're elected on June the 7th for 14 million people, and I take that seriously. I also have a proven track record. When I say I'm going to do something, we've done it. Under the City of Toronto, we saved the taxpayers over $1.16 billion, and not one single person lost their job. And under our government, I'm going to reinforce this, not one single person will lose their job. What I say I'm going to do, we're going to do. I'm the only one with a proven track record of governing and saving the taxpayers' money and keeping promises, not breaking promises, not saying one thing and doing something else. That's what I promised the people, and I will turn this province around, and we will have this province moving like you've never seen before. We'll see economic growth. We'll see new jobs being created. The likes this province has never seen. Prosperity to the people, prosperity to companies. We're going to need more people. We're going to need to hire more nurses, more teachers when the economy is going. My friends,
okay, Mr. Ford,
we will have this economy booming.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Kathleen Wynne, you have the next opportunity to respond.
So 4 years ago, I promised the people of Ontario that I would build this province up. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've created nearly 1 million jobs. We've built roads and bridges and transit all over this province. We've got the lowest unemployment rate in nearly 20 years. And the economy is growing and outstripping the growth of other parts of Canada and the United States. So what we are seeing in Ontario is prosperity that is drawing business, that is allowing businesses to expand. And at the same time, we've got 235,000 students whose tuition is being covered. We've got children whose prescription medication is being covered. So what we've done is build the province up in a way that deals with infrastructure deficits that had been left by previous governments. And at the same time, we're making our economy fairer for everyone, not just for a few people, but for everyone in this province. Everyone who needs free tuition, everyone who needs prescription medication, for families who need more home care. All of that is happening at the same time that the economy is growing. And our plan that we're putting forward would build on that. So I did what I said I was going to do, and we know that we can continue to foster economic growth in the province.
Andrea Horwath.
Thanks, Steve. You know, it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of people as they watch governments make promises that life's going to get better, only to see that after 25 years of Liberal and Conservative governments, life just keeps getting harder for families. And when people say, when politicians say, well, we're going to make it better and you can trust us, we make all these promises, it makes people cynical about politics. And one of the things that I find very, very worrisome is that's what turns people off of voting. And it makes people think that you can't have change. That no matter who gets elected, and I don't know if you folks have heard it, but I've heard it many times, no matter who gets elected, it's all going to be the same. And I think that this is an election where we can actually make change for the better, where we can say we don't have to go back to Liberal and Conservative governments. We can have a government that puts people at the heart of every decision, so that it's not about getting a bump in the and it's not about slogans and bumper stickers. It's about people and families each and every time. That's what New Democrats have fought for. That's what I fought for as leader for 9 years in the legislature, proudly. And prior to that, when I was a city councillor, and as well when I was an MPP. And all I can say is this. I believe that we can make this province a place where everyone can build a good life. And I'm asking that folks have some trust in that for a change.
The rules now provide for open debate among the three of you, and Mr. Ford, you get the first comment.
Well, trust comes down to who do you trust with your money? Do you trust an NDP government that says they have a budget and then mysteriously they made a mistake of $7 billion on their own budget? And their own plan. So their plan's out the window.
Mr. Ford, not true.
Their plan is actually out the window. You made a $7 billion mistake. So the NDP can't do math, obviously.
So
and the Liberals are cooking the books.
Mr. Ford, in
There's
fact,
one person that they can trust
money
that has a proven,
okay, stand by.
proven record.
Mr. Ford, take 10 seconds to finish your point, then we'll hear Andrea Horwath.
And then I'd like
And then Ms. Wynne.
There's one person that has a proven record of saving the taxpayers' money. We don't make mistakes in our budget. We don't make $7 billion mistakes.
Do you have a plan?
We don't cook the books to $12 billion.
Okay, let's hear Andrea
Horwath's
response.
We make sure we keep our promises.
Let's give Andrea a chance to respond. Andrea Horwath.
So we did admit that there was a mistake and we fixed it right away. It's nowhere near what Mr. Ford's talking about, but there you go. Inflating of numbers when we haven't even seen any numbers from Mr. Ford. People started voting yesterday, Mr. Ford. Where is your platform? Where is your respect for the people now when they're already at the polls and you haven't provided them any information about what it is that you plan to do in our province? What are you going to cut?
Kathleen
What
Wynne's
is going to
turn.
suffer from
Kathleen
Mr.
Wynne,
Ford's
please.
cuts?
Yeah, and I think, Doug, nobody has any idea what those 10, 12, 14, we don't even know what the number is, $1 billion worth of cuts would mean to the people of this province. What we do know is that education and healthcare would be hurt. There is absolutely no way that you can take billions of dollars out of the services that are provided in this province and not hurt education and healthcare. And I'm only standing here tonight because I got involved in provincial politics because of what Mike Harris was doing in this province, cutting across government, which is exactly what, Doug, you have proposed. And I would just say to you, Andrea, that, you know, to suggest that somehow the economy is not growing in Ontario and people are not finding a life that they can be proud of is just not the case. Of course we can do better. Of course that there's more that we can do. But to suggest that there hasn't been improvement since Mike Harris was the Premier is just not the case.
But Kathleen, the question was about trust. And I was in the legislature the day that you said straight to my face that you had no intention of selling off Hydro One. And then what did you do? A couple of months later, you started selling off Hydro One. That goes straight to trust, Kathleen.
I'm going to have to stop the discussion now because we're on to our next question from journalists. And our next question, it's about affordability. And Ms. Wynne, you're going to have the first chance to respond to this question. We've heard a lot of people complain that life in Ontario isn't as affordable as they would like. What specific policy changes are you offering to address this? Once again, Ms. Wynne, you can start us off.
Thanks very much. And I think that we all know that as our economy changes, as our society changes, as our society ages, people are confronting costs that they might not have before. And we recognize that. And so this is not a matter of what are we going to do going forward. We are already putting in place supports. That's what covering the cost of tuition for low and middle income families is about. That's what free prescription medication for children from their birth till their 25th birthday is about, and seniors next year. We recognize that we need to make sure that there are supports that are put in place so that people can have that extra amount of money in their pocket. We know that there's a need for support for dental and support for pharma for the rest of the population. That's what our plan is about. Parents who are looking for childcare need to know that that's going to be available. You know, go to any playground at any school in Ontario and you'll meet young moms and dads who need to find childcare. So our plan is about building on the full-day kindergarten that we've already put in place and putting in place free preschool childcare. All of those things are about helping people with the affordability of their lives. But what we're not going to do is cut taxes so that we can't actually deliver the services that people need. And that's exactly what Doug Ford would do.
Ms. Horwath, your turn.
Thanks very much for the question. You know, it reminds me of a woman that I met just very recently in Scarborough when we were doing a childcare announcement about making sure that childcare is available at $12 a day for families. And she approached our bus. She wasn't part of our press conference. She approached our bus and waited for me to come out to say hello. She's a woman that was in her late 30s, 3 kids. And she said to me, Andrea, I did everything that I was supposed to do. She said, I went to school, I got my degree. At first, I didn't get a job in my field, but I did eventually. She said, I'm a single mom now with 3 kids, and I've done everything that I was supposed to do, but I have to go to a food bank to feed my children every week. She said, I can't pay the rent, I can't pay my hydro bill, I don't have a plan for my kids in terms of dental benefits. This is exactly what our plan is all about. It's to help folks have a more affordable life so that they can have hope for the future. No mom should have to take her kids to a food bank or feed her kids through a food bank if she's working full-time and doing the best she can. The cost of housing is too unaffordable. The cost of childcare is too unaffordable. Years and years of Liberal government, and things have gotten harder for families and not better. And that's why our plan not only deals with prescription drugs and dental and childcare, but it recognizes that these are the things that families need to build a good life here.
Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, you think it's unaffordable now under the Liberals, and it's bad, but it's going to get 10 times worse under the NDP. We've seen this show before. We've seen when the NDP were in power that 125,000 people lost their jobs. Unemployment skyrocketed to 28%. Welfare rates went up. We had the highest taxes in North America. My friends, I'm going to reduce your personal income tax by 20%. I'm going to reduce the gas price per liter by 10 cents a liter. I'm going to reduce your hydro rates by 12%. That is true savings. My friends here to the right, the NDP and the Liberals, they believe in one thing: big government, tax, spend. The people that are most vulnerable are the low-income people that get hurt. When they put the carbon tax jacks up the gas price, the worst tax ever, jacks up the gas prices, but jacks up every single item you buy in the store, and it does nothing for the environment. They believe in high taxes. I believe in empowering the people, not empowering the government. The people can spend their money a lot wiser than the government can. That's the difference between the NDP, the Liberals, and the PCs.
Okay, Mr. Ford, thank you very much for that. Ms. Wynne, will you please begin this period of open debate?
Yeah, so, you know, Doug, if you believe that people need to have more money in their pockets, it's interesting that you don't support raising the minimum wage, because the minimum wage is making a huge difference to people across this province, and we've committed to increasing it to $15 an hour next year. You don't support that. And Andrea, you know, the child care plan, and you know, the fact is that we share a lot of the same values, but your plan won't work. That's the problem with it. Your child care plan will actually create long wait lists.
Your plan has people paying $2,000 a month for child care in Toronto. That's what your plan has done. You've been in office for 15 years. The problems that families are facing, the struggles they're having, is because you haven't been paying attention to everyday folks and what they need
Andrea,
to build a good life in our province. And I'm sorry, Mr. Ford, $18 a year in tax breaks.
Let's let Mr. Ford have a say.
Life more affordable.
Your plan would annihilate the middle class. Your plan would bankrupt this province. You know it. You're spending
wrong, Mr.
30, 40, 50 billion dollars. Where is your money coming from?
Mr. Ford, you talk about being for the people.
Your plan is coming from the middle class.
You talk about being for the people.
Reducing taxes.
Country. We've assembled 3 former premiers, and they will be here to discuss the potential effects of this election on the Federation right after this. Welcome back to this special edition of Power and Politics. I'm Vassy Kapelos, and we are live from outside the CBC Broadcasting Centre in Toronto, bringing you extensive coverage of the Ontario election. By the end of today, Ontario is expected to have a new premier, but this election isn't just about Ontario. The results will have far-reaching consequences for a federation that right now is fractured over pipelines and climate policy. Earlier, we spoke with three former premiers: former BC Premier Ujjal Dosanjh, former Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall, and former Ontario Premier David Peterson. I asked them what a Ford win would mean for the federal Liberals.
Well, I think it means some trouble on the environment file. Obviously, the planning that and the policy that Mr. Trudeau is following in terms of the carbon tax is going to face some resistance if Mr. Ford is the premier. If the NDP, on the other hand, wins the election, Mr. Trudeau's life might be a little easier on some of these policies. In terms of the pipeline, I mean, that issue it won't be impacted by whether or not you have Doug Ford or Andrea Horwath, but the carbon issue absolutely will be impacted. And in fact, it might become slightly more difficult to govern in terms of the federal, provincial premiers and first ministers' conferences with Doug Ford, who sometimes is you can't tell what he's going to do. He's unpredictable. So going into federal provincial conferences or first ministers' conferences, there might be a great deal of uncertainty as to where Ontario might stand. And I think that is not good for the Federation. Not to say that I'm a partisan, but the federal government and the provinces need to be able to work on these very important issues in somewhat of a nonpartisan way.
Mr. Peterson, let me ask you, as a former premier of this province, the biggest economy, the most populous province, how significant is it on to the country as a whole? How this election?
It is extremely significant, and here's why: there's no other federation in the world where one piece is so important, 40% of the GDP, and it's one of the most jurisdiction that's diverse in its responsibilities. So they have so much, the provinces have so much power. When I was here, I spent a great deal of time building relationships with Quebec, with Ottawa, and with my friends in the West, with Don Getty, and with Grant Devine, and others, and Bill Bennett. And these were great Canadians. And even Peter Lougheed, who was there, he was a local guy, but he never forgot the national interest. And I think how this is approached, and the size of the hearts and the understanding of the needs and pressures in this great country are going to be really strained in the next little while. And I really hope they can all step up to it. Look what's happening out west now. It's sad for the country what's happening. And I get it, and I'm not getting into the issues here, but let me just say, if we can't find answers, we're going to put pressures on this confederation like we've never had before.
Mr. Wall, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree. There's pressures coming on the Federation, notwithstanding the result tonight in Ontario, but certainly the Ontario election will play a part in informing the intensity, I guess, of that tension, of that stress. We also have an Alberta election coming up probably within a year, and we have the equalization debate or discussion that looms as that federal program needs to be renewed, and I think those are all pressure points that are upcoming. I'd just say this about tonight's election. I mean, obviously, I think as your viewers will know that Saskatchewan is the holdout on the carbon tax, and my successor, Premier Moe, has indicated that continues to be the position of the province of Saskatchewan, and if need be, we'll go to court. There haven't been a lot of allies on that position, admittedly so, around the table. That could change tonight. There could be a very powerful ally. David's appropriately canvassed the influence of Ontario and the Federation, not just economically, but in terms of politics and the Federation itself. And based on what Ford has said up during the campaign, Saskatchewan might expect to have an ally in that court case, if it comes to that, against the federal government carbon tax, and maybe another one in just less than a year when the Alberta situation may or may not change, I guess. I would also offer this thought. Regardless of whether or not it's Premier Horwath or Premier Ford tonight, Ontarians will have weighed in on a pretty important issue in the election campaign, and that is the issue of environmental policy and its impact on families and businesses vis-a-vis electricity rates. Because we all want to get to the point where energy's cleaner. There's no doubt about it. Whether you support a carbon tax or not, we want to get to the point where where renewables, where clean energy is the baseload energy for the world. That should be the focus of everybody. But if you move precipitously on that front, there's an impact, a policy impact, and one that will hit the voters, one that hits families in terms of the rates that they pay for electricity there in Ontario or anywhere else, and it hurts your competitiveness potentially in the short, the midterm, and possibly the long term. Now, the architect for some of this policy anyway would have been an advisor to Mr. Premier McGuinty, Gerald Butts. He's the advisor to the Prime Minister today, and much of what we see from the current federal government, I think, is similar to what we saw in Ontario years ago that's led to this point. And so I think the election tonight is informative about the impact politics of some of the ideas that we've seen even imposed federally, but certainly it'll tell us a lot about how voters in Ontario feel about the impact of environmental policy in their province.
But Brad, can I say something? And I do believe this. I believe as Ontario, as the biggest and the richest, has the biggest responsibility to reach out and assist the smooth functioning of this confederation. I think we have more responsibility than some of the smaller provinces that don't have the economic might. But at the same time, this depends on the quality of the people that are coming forward, who reflect their electorates, who believe at the end of the day this federation is worth fighting for. I saw it, interesting enough, in the original Meech Lake discussions in 1987, 1990, when I saw active leadership of Don Getty and Michael Harcourt and Grant Devine, that people were yelling at them all the time. They could have easily turned on those situations, but they put the interest of the nation first. So our Prime Minister is going to have to call on the best instincts of these guys, these people who were ever elected, and they have a responsibility to think of the Confederation as well.
Mr. Desange, the last word to you.
I think David makes a great point. I think in the past, historically, Ontario has stood for the Federation in a much more dignified way that has brought the country together. Vis-a-vis Quebec, I think Ontario has always been at the center of negotiations to keep Quebec with us. And I think whoever wins is going to have that responsibility going forward on many of these issues the Federation faces.
Okay, thank you very much to all three of you. Thanks to the Premiers League, Ujjal Desange, Brad Wall, and David Peterson.
Fun to be with you guys.
Thanks, David. See you, Vashi.
See ya. The Ontario election could be seen as a dress rehearsal for next year's federal election. Will tonight's result determine how the federal parties plan their campaigns in 2019? I'll put that question to 3 Ontario MPs after this. Welcome back to this special edition of Power in Politics. I'm Vashi Kapelos. Polls in most of Ontario are open for just another hour and 15 minutes, and tonight's results will be closely watched in Ottawa. Many MPs are taking notes as they prepare for a federal election in 2019. In fact, many Ontario MPs are actively working for their provincial cousins to help get out the vote today. Earlier, I spoke with 3 of them. Here with me now in Toronto is Marco Mendicino, Ontario Liberal MP for Eglinton Lawrence. Joining me from Ottawa is Tony Clement, Ontario Conservative MP for Parry Sound Muskoka. And in Windsor is Tracy Ramsey, Ontario NDP MP for Essex. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be on.
Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Mendicino, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask everybody the same question to start because I'm very interested. I know what team you're cheering for, but what specifically are you looking for tonight as in terms of efficiency and get out the vote, and what areas of the province are you really drilling down on?
Well, look, I'm back home in Toronto, and my riding is Eglinton Lawrence, which is actually right in the geographic heart of the city. But let's just start with the fact that we're celebrating an election. It's that one time in the electoral cycle where people get to go to the ballot box and put a name beside the representative that they think will best be their representative, in this case at Queen's Park. In my riding, that's Mike Cole, who's been doing it for a long time, and here's somebody who through thick and thin has been an incredible voice for our community. He has stood up for things like Postal Station K, the Eglinton Theatre. Most recently, he defended Columbus Centre. I mean, these are cultural hearts of our community. And obviously, more broadly than that, I think everybody is out there trying to motivate their volunteers. You know, this is the culmination. This is the sort of end point. And you can't thank them enough for the blood, sweat, and the tears that they put into it. There's a lot of emotions that go into Election Day, Vashi. And what we're really trying to do right now is just bring them across the finish line. Last thing I'll say is that Premier Wynne, who I was just with this past weekend at Casa Loma, where she mingled among thousands, was warmly embraced. And that was nice to see, because I think that she's had a tenure that she can be quite proud of with all the work that we've done in partnership with the federal government. And we're looking forward to working with the next government, whoever that is. That tenure, Mr. Clement, most likely will be over tonight. So what specifically are you looking for beyond, just hoping that your team crosses the finish line?
Well, it's been a long time, I must say, Vashi. I was part of a previous successful Progressive Conservative Ontario government. The last time the Ontario PCs won an election was 1999, so in case you're wondering, that was a previous century. So I think that there's a little bit of anticipation. Look, we don't know what's going to happen until it happens, but this is, I think, the one time since 1999 that PCs can say, honestly say, that there's a reasonable chance of forming a government. So I think at this point we're busy. Everybody's out there busy getting the voters out, as Marco mentioned as well. We've got a very well-trained team across the province, and we're looking forward to the ballots being counted.
Ms. Ramsey, we've seen the popular support for the NDP rise during this campaign for sure, but there are questions about the efficiency of that vote. What are you looking for tonight in that area?
Well, we have an army on the ground. We have so much positivity in our campaign right now. It's electric. People are incredibly excited about electing Andrea Horwath to be our next premier, and all of the incredible candidates that we have across Ontario. Our incumbent seats are very active, but of course we're growing. We're looking to take seats in southwestern Ontario, in the GTA, and back in the north. So it's a very exciting time for New Democrats, and it really is about people winning this election. And that's what New Democrats really want to see, is a province where we have a premier who they can trust, who they know will take care of their families. And so that's driving people out in record numbers for us to be out there on E-Day, of course, today, but they've been out there with us for this entire campaign, putting their blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that we have a progressive government in Ontario.
Mr. Mendicino, the polls are not everything, but obviously they don't bode well for your party right now. And there are people wondering if there'll even be enough seats to retain official party status. Are you worried about that? Well, that's why it's so important to continue to motivate your volunteers. So that means you are worried? Well, I think, look, we're obviously at a cycle in
in governing. And as Tony pointed out, actually, it wasn't just last century, it was a different millennium. So look, we're motivating our people to go out there and to get the vote out, and we will obviously wait and see. And I do think that there is going to continue to be a very core group of voters who will support the Ontario Liberal Party, because ultimately we know, and this is true in Toronto, that many Ontarians are progressive. Those progressive values, wanting to really drive growth and to ensure that everybody has a shot at some success. And that has been one of the bedrock values that has informed the Ontario agenda, as well as us federally. But look, we've got to make sure that we get it across the finish line, and that's why right after this panel I'm going to be going back up to Eglinton Lawrence to pull vote.
Mr. Clement, I know you were involved in your local riding, but was there any hesitancy among members of your party about attaching yourself too much to the leadership of the PC party here in Ontario? I remember in the last federal election near the end there, Mr. Harper did an event with the Fords. It didn't go over so well. Were there any concerns on your part about that?
No, and in fact, I've been involved in this election campaign in about 10 ridings throughout the province. So I've seen it not only from my home riding of Parry Sound Muskoka, but in southwestern Ontario, in the GTA, and other areas as well. And there's a genuine excitement. I think that Doug Ford has been able to be disciplined. Look, he just started as leader in mid-March, so to come all this way in a very quick timeline is almost unprecedented. And I think it shows the discipline that he's shown, the fact that he's concentrated on people-friendly messages, whether it's the hydro rates or making life generally more affordable, lower taxes, cutting government waste. These are things that Ontarians have been waiting to hear from a political party for a long time. So there's a real excitement that has been brewing in this campaign, and it's culminating today.
Ms. Ramsey, I think it's maybe fair to say that at times over the past few months, it's been a bit of a struggle for Jagmeet Singh. How do you think your party at the federal level might be able to capitalize on the success the NDP has, at least in the polls so far, seen during this campaign?
Well, it's clear to us that when Ontarians are looking for a progressive party to represent them in this election, it's the NDP. So, of course, for us at the federal level, that's quite exciting. It's very exciting to see that Ontarians are, looking at us and looking at our platform, looking at the NDP and knowing that we have a fully costed platform, and also that we're the party that they trust right now. There's a lot of mistrust around Doug Ford. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of things that are happening, including, a not very solid platform that Ontarians are not willing to get behind. So progressive people are coming, flocking really to our campaigns on the ground, which is exciting. And of course, that always speaks well for us in terms of what we can do federally. I think in the last election federally, we certainly had a change election. And, in this particular case, Andrea Horwath is ready to be the Premier of Ontario. She's experienced in Queen's Park. I've seen her grow over this last period of time by leaps and bounds. This is a woman who has dedicated her career to becoming the Premier, and she's on the cusp of that. So that's very exciting for us. And of course, federally, everyone is watching what's happening as well. The collapse of the Liberals in Ontario, I'm sure, is making a lot of Liberals at the federal level quite nervous. But for us, it really is speaking to the fact that our progressive values and what people know us to be as a party is attracting them. So that's a positive thing for us both provincially and federally.
I have 30 seconds left, Mr. Mendicino, so I'll get the last question to you, picking up on what Ms. Ramsey said. How worried is your government right now about the possibility of Premier Ford?
Well, look, the Prime Minister has said that he is prepared to work with whatever government is elected, and
he always says that. But
no,
what's
I know,
the truth?
but let me get. But the truth is that if you take a look at other examples, we've been able to forge important cooperation on things like health. There were a series of agreements which were struck with provincial governments of every stripe. And I think when you take a look at that, when you take a look at our partnership on infrastructure, and yes, true as well when it comes to the environment, we're going to continue to cooperate.
Although Doug Ford wants to fight your carbon plan.
Well, look, the most important thing is that we have a dialogue, and the Prime Minister is collected to that. And the most important thing for Ontarians is to get out there and vote. This is really a day that we should all cherish, and I'm going to make sure that we go up there and get as many Liberal votes out there as possible for Mike Cole.
Okay, thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Tracy Ramsey, Tony Clement, and Marco Mendicino.
Thank you. Thanks, Vashi.
Thanks.
The millennial vote could decide this election. Which way are they leaning? Hannah Thibodeau is here with that angle coming up next. Welcome back to this special edition of Power in Politics. I'm Vashi Kapelos here in Toronto. The clock is winding down to 9 p.m. Eastern when most of the polls in Ontario close and we start seeing results. Polls suggest the PCs and NDP are running very closely in the popular vote, but that is not how this race started. The CBC's Hannah Thibedeau has spent the past 4 weeks following the twists and turns of this dramatic race and joins me now. Hey, Hannah, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so like we just said, it was a clear, path to victory for Doug Ford initially, and then something changed.
Yeah, he had a 17-point lead going into this election campaign just over 4 weeks ago. However, there have been controversies for him and the party, candidate controversies. His, sister-in-law suing him in last week for $16.5 million, saying she mismanaged the party. So anything less for Doug Ford and the Conservatives at this point, even if they don't get a majority, it really could be seen as a loss for them, and it could be played out that way. So they really hope to get that majority tonight. As for NDP's Andrea Horwath, who they've been neck and neck with the Progressive Conservatives quite a way through, they say, a majority is good, a minority is possible, but even if they get official opposition, that is going to be one of the best standings for them since Bob Rae's government in the 1990s. So, of course, they're looking for change. What type of change? We're going to have to find out a little bit later.
I have to ask you about the significance of the millennial vote, a story that you followed throughout the campaign.
Yeah, this one is interesting. And first, this is the first election where millennials, eligible voters, outnumber baby boomers. So really, if you look at that, they could be an unstoppable force. Look at what happened in the federal election. Justin Trudeau targeted the millennials in the federal election campaign, and in fact, it increased by almost 20%, which helped him obtain his majority. So if they get out there and vote, they could make a big difference in this campaign. However, a lot of them I talked to said, I don't know the issues. I'm not going to go vote. And that just drives me crazy, especially as political junkies. They need to get out there and vote.
Thanks, Hannah. The CBC's Hannah Thibedeau. That is a wrap for our special extended edition of Power in Politics, but the excitement of election night is only just beginning. Dwight Drummond and Rosemary Barton are standing by to bring you all the results and reaction in this closely fought campaign. I'll be joining them along with Eric Grenier, Mike Waz, and reporters across the province. If you're watching us on CBC TV, now is the time to switch over to CBC News Network so you don't miss a minute of the action. I'm Vashi Kapelos. I'll be back here tomorrow with all the political reaction to the Ontario election. We're handing things over now to Dwight Drummond.
With the Liberals.
And we have reporters covering key races today as well. We're in ridings from across the GTA, from the east in Ajax to the north in York Simcoe, out west to Etobicoke and Mississauga, Brampton, and further down the 401 into Guelph.
And tonight, we're coming to you from all of our platforms, online at globalnews.ca, over the airwaves with Global News Radio, and of course, right here on your TV screen. Now, for those of you watching, here's how you can follow along. We got a clock counting down to when the polls close. Plus, right down here at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see the overall race with the leading and elected count, the chiclets, as we call them, right across the top there. And just under that, the races in the individual ridings, along with the numbers for the 124 seats. 124 ridings are up for grabs this year in Ontario. And for those of you who are listening or just watching television with your eyes closed, we'll keep you in the loop every step of the way.
And for the most immediate results, you can always go online, too, to globalnews.ca. Now, most polls across this province are going to close at 9 p.m. But Elections Ontario says there are 7 ridings experiencing problems right now. That's going to delay some of the results. They include Bay of Quinte, Essex, Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, Simcoe North, York Simcoe, York South Weston, and Kiiwetinoong. Now, once the numbers start coming in, they're going to be tracked by our decision desk. Global News is working alongside a team from Wilfrid Laurier University to break down the numbers and give you the big picture. There they are. And that's Barry Kay from Wilfrid Laurier University, who is going to be helping us break down those numbers and trends.
But ask yourself, what has happened since the last time we did this in Ontario? In 2014, at this point, Kathleen Wynne was pretty hopeful. And in a couple of hours from this point in 2014, she was over the moon because she had just won a majority government, returning the Liberals to majority status. So what happened since then? Well, there are 3 things that really have hurt the Wynne administration. The first began pretty quickly after she won that majority. The Sudbury by-election scandal. You may remember this. What happened is that the NDP MPP who had won in Sudbury in 2014, 6 months later suddenly resigned. So there was a by-election. And Ms. Wynne decided that Glenn Thibeault, an NDP MP, a federal politician, would make a much better candidate for the Liberals than the young man who had previously run. And all of that ended with this: Kathleen Wynne having to go to court as a portion of the election law in Ontario was tried for the very first time. For the very first time in Ontario, a sitting premier had to go to court. She was not charged, but it was not good news for the Liberals. The other big thing that happened over the last 4 years, of course, power and hydro. Global News documented a number of cases of people having to live without any power, transporting water, trying to run generators because they simply could not afford their power and had been cut off. Midway through her administration, Kathleen Wynne said this is something that they just did not get on top of fast enough. The Liberals pivoted halfway through and said, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to lower everybody's hydro price on average by 25% and do that through deficit financing, but the damage had been done. And of course, the last one, cap and trade. January 1st of this year, cap and trade comes in and your gas bill goes up about, on average, 4 cents a liter as a result. Of course, Mr. Ford has promised if he wins tonight, that is gone.
So Alan outlined some of the reasons there, but still, Kathleen Wynne started this race in it to win it. We have seen, though, a huge reversal in fortune for the Premier and leader of the Liberal Party. Let's bring in our Shalima Maharaj to talk a bit more about that. And Ms. Wynne conceded the other week that she wouldn't win. So what's the mood like? What are party faithful saying tonight?
Well, right now it's still fairly quiet. We don't have a lot of supporters already arriving, but right now who I am joined by is Tim Murphy, campaign co-chair. So Tim, obviously one of the big shockers of this whole campaign run was the concession speech 5 days early. When you reflect on this, was this the right move and what was the impetus for it?
Well, we'll have to wait and see whether it was the right move. I mean, look, the impetus was fairly straightforward. There were a significant amount of polling data and other data we were hearing from our own candidates that there was the potential for a majority Ford government, and the only way to stop that was to elect some Liberals in a number of key seats where, frankly, the Democrats have never won that riding since Confederation. So the only way to stop them was to be able to elect a Liberal. There was some hesitancy because people said, well, I'm not sure I want to endorse the government. Say, okay, we'll take that out of the mix. You can vote for that high-quality local candidate, and frankly, we've got hundreds of, 124 of them across the province of great candidates. And what we're saying to Global News voters, the polls aren't closed yet. You can go out and try and stop a Doug Ford majority by voting Liberal.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck tonight.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll send it back to you in studio.
Okay, Shalima, thank you so much for that. We're going to go back to Jamie Mauracher now. You saw her at the beginning of the show. Jamie, I'm sure a much more optimistic mood among the PCs for Doug Ford.
That's absolutely right, Farah. There's lots of excitement here today, and I have to say that we are in the center of Ford Nation. I walked around the room a little bit earlier, and it doesn't so much seem to be lifelong conservatives who are here at Congress Center, but rather hardcore Doug Ford supporters. They came here specifically to see Doug Ford, and they will be seeing him not long from now. He's set to appear here at the Congress Center and watch some of those results roll in around 9 o'clock this afternoon. We did see Doug Ford out this morning. He made his way down to the polls. He cast his ballot with his family by his side, and he is spending the first part of the evening with his family as well. We'll see more of that in just a little bit. But again, like I said, this is absolutely Ford Nation. They are all hopeful that Doug Ford is not only going to become the next premier, but that he's going to bring with him a majority government. I'll send it back into you.
Okay, Jamie Mauracher and Etobicoke, thank you so much for that. We're going to go to Mark Harkisol now in Hamilton with the NDP, and Andrea Horwath is going to be there later on tonight, and this could still be a big party for her, Mark.
It could be a very big one, Farah, because they are essentially almost guaranteed a good night here. With Kathleen Wynne's concession last weekend, a lot of people feel as though they were at least pretty much handed second place by the Liberal Party. So there are a lot of NDP staffers here, and that's mostly who's filling up this room right now is a lot of the staff members. Not seen a ton of supporters yet. And then, of course, you've got us media types here as well. But there's a lot of people who feel like the worst they can do here is second place. The worst Andrea Horwath will be in Queen's Park when this night is over is the official leader of the opposition. There's also a thought, though, that with that last-minute crunch that she put out there, 1,200 kilometers on the road in the campaign bus, going all over southwestern Ontario, that she might have done enough to convince undecided voters, to bring over former Liberal voters now looking for a new home. There's a real sense of optimism here that she could very well have done it. We will see later on tonight. Andrea Horwath is expected to be here at 9 o'clock to address supporters. In what capacity? We'll find out soon. Back to you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. With that big bus behind Mark. He spent a lot of time in that bus during the campaign. I wonder if it's the same one. Global's chief political correspondent, David Akin, joins us now. Thanks for being here, David.
It's fun. This is like, for political reporters, this is, we love this. Let's have another election tomorrow.
Like Super Bowl and Christmas all wrapped up.
And this has been one crazy campaign.
It certainly has. And really, it started back on January 24th when Patrick Brown called that impromptu press conference at Queen's Park. It hasn't ended since then. The drama has just been full tilt. You're going to watch a couple of key ridings.
All right, let's take a general election is going to be 124 individual races. Let's take a look at some. Peterborough-Kawartha is where we're going to start. Why? That's been a bellwether riding for most of the last 4.5 decades. Since 1977, Peterborough-Kawartha has elected a government MP. Right now, Liberal Jeff Leal is the incumbent. If the PCs win, does that mean Dave Smith comes from Peterborough? Or maybe they elect NDP Sean Conway? Who knows? Let's take a look at the riding of Milton. We want to look at this riding and other ridings like it that have a popular Liberal cabinet minister, popular in their own riding. Indira Naidoo-Harris is that. Can she hold on? Can her own popularity exceed Wynne's unpopularity? Let's move to Chatham-Kent-Leamington in the southwest. This is a straight-up blue on orange fight. Rick Nichols is the incumbent. He won by 8 points. But can the NDP take this riding? They're right on his heels, and if the NDP has any hope of government, they have to win ridings like this off the PCs in southwest Ontario, Chatham-Kent-Leamington, and Sarnia-Lambton. Finally, we're going to look at some old-timers, been around a long time. Eglinton Lawrence, Mike Cole, very popular in his own riding. He was first elected in 1995. He could lose tonight to the progressive conservative Robin Martin. He's going to have the fight of his life on his hands. There's other long-time lifers. Michael Gravel in Thunder Bay Superior North. St. Catharines, Jim Bradley, elected in 1977. He could lose tonight. What else happened in 1977? This is how long Jim's been in. The Sex Pistols released Nevermind the Bollocks. Bollocks to that.
You weren't even born then.
That's just kidding. That's nice. Well, maybe there won't be anarchy in the UK, but a little anarchy in Ontario.
Very nice.
Thank you. Okay?
Very.
We're dating ourselves here. Sad.
Okay, what would an election be without a team of political strategists? And that's what we have here, giving us the behind-the-scenes view.
These three have the inside track on what's been going on through the campaign. Deb Hutton was a senior advisor to former Ontario Premiers Mike Harris and Ernie Eves. She's now corporate communications advisor. Omar Khan is a Liberal campaign strategist. He served as chief of staff for several Liberal ministers in the Dalton McGuinty and the Wynne governments. And political commentator Tom Parkin. Tom Parkin is a former NDP staffer. Folks, great to have you here.
All right, let's start off by, I want to ask each one of you, what was the key moment in the campaign for all three of you? Let's start with you, Deb.
I think it was on day one when Ford came out of the gate extremely strong. He made his first commitment, a costed commitment about GTA Transit on day one. And I think that showed that he was ready to go. Keep in mind, if Mr. Ford wins tonight, he will only have been leader of our party for less than 100 days. And that's a pretty amazing feat.
Was there a turning point for you, Tom? Something that changed the game?
Big moment, I think, for Andrea, and what really started to get her momentum launched was the release of her platform on April, I think it was April the 15th. This is something that I think the New Democrat members really liked. They could get their teeth in it. It had a lot of meat on it. There was a lot of great stuff inside of it, fully costed. Not just the items, but they also totaled it up and showed how they pay for it. This is an important thing in politics. And
jab, right
little jab, my friend.
Beside you.
But I think it was a great moment that people said, listen, she's putting forward a plan for governing. And then she started the dialogue about, that we're being faced with settling for bad and worse, and we can do something better. And I think the narrative started to climb from there.
Okay, to you, Omar. Sorry, you're last. Actually, I'm not sorry.
Oh.
I'm not sorry.
No.
I think the Green Party is going to be below us. Look, obviously this has been a tough campaign for Ontario Liberals. It's not over yet. I think we're going to outperform expectations. But for me, the turning point was when Premier Wynne showed up to the debate and really showed that she was the only adult in the room. I think she clearly won that debate. She was the one who had substance and was respectful, I feel, to the other two candidates. But it didn't really move the numbers all that much. I think there was a modest bump, but we were really hoping to be propelled at least into second place after that performance. It didn't happen.
We just heard Tim Murphy, co-chair of the Liberals, in that live hit from the Liberal headquarters say, you can still go out and vote Liberal to stop Doug Ford.
Absolutely.
Tom, is that how this works?
Well, maybe there's a place somewhere, but we'll see what happens at the end of the night. Because of 124 ridings out there, we know that the vast majority of these are competitions between the New Democrats and the PCs. And if you would like Doug Ford, good for you. Vote for the guy. Vote for his candidate.
Does that mean that Tim's helping you?
Don't like him.
Deb, Tim is helping you. The Liberals are helping you here.
I don't think so. But I also don't think that the Liberals helped themselves with their strategy as of last Saturday to say, I'm out of here, Premier Kathleen Wynne, still vote Liberal.
Okay, lots to talk about, but we're going to wrap it up. We're going to come back to you. I don't mean to interrupt you, Tom, but I want to talk about this. This is the 42nd election in Ontario's history. Let's get a look now at how past votes have played out. Here's Eric Sorensen.
In the history of Ontario, there has been continuity, seldom disrupted. Conservatives and Liberals alternating as the parties in power 94% of the time. In the 151 years since Confederation, Liberals and Conservatives have governed for 142 years.
For a time, it looked like Ontario was becoming a one-party government. 75 years ago, George Drew led a brand new party, the Progressive Conservatives, to victory and won 3 terms. Then Leslie Frost won 3 more terms for the party. He was followed by John Robarts, who won twice for the PCs, and then Bill Davis won 4 times. 12 elections in a row won by the Progressive Conservatives, 42 years in power, and then disruption. It took 2 parties and 2 leaders to shake up Ontario.
In 1985, the Conservatives won the most seats on election night, but the Liberals, led by David Peterson, joined with New Democrat Bob Rae to bring down the PCs. Together, they had more seats and a far greater percentage of the popular vote, justifying the change. It was a tumultuous period. Peterson's Liberals winning a massive majority in the next election. Then Bob Rae shocked Ontario with the first and only NDP government in the province's history. In 1995, Ontario returned to its historic pattern of Conservatives and Liberals running 1-2. Mike Harris and the PCs, then Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne of the Liberals. Until 2018. Historic disruption once more. Doug Ford could win or blow a big lead. Andrea Horwath and the NDP, perennial third-place finishers, will fight tonight for first or second. And Kathleen Wynne's Liberals are bracing for an historic downfall for a party that has only finished third 4 times in 151 years. And could this be the worst Liberal showing of all?
Now, there's one person looking to make history in Ontario politics tonight, and he is the leader of the Green Party. I'm going to throw it over to Camille Kermali, who is in Guelph at his party headquarters, where the candidate has arrived.
That's right, Farah. So the viewing party here, the doors opened just about 15 minutes ago, and people have been starting to trickle in here. Now, the word everyone is using today, Green Party supporters are using today, is the word historic, because there's a good chance that Mike Schreiner could win this riding of Guelph and become the first Green Party MPP at Queen's Park. So Mike Schreiner joins me now here. And Mike, how are you feeling just hours before results come in?
Cautiously optimistic, but also very excited and inspired by the passionate, committed, and hardworking volunteers that are still out there trying to get people to the polls.
Now, traditionally, in the past decade at least, this has been a Liberal stronghold. What's so different this year that gives you believe, a better shot?
Well, I think people have seen me as somebody very active in the community, a champion for Guelph, and a strong voice for change at Queen's Park. And this has certainly been a change election, and I'm hoping that people in Guelph decide that green is the change they want.
And you told me earlier some dissatisfaction with the other parties.
Oh, absolutely. I'm hearing that dissatisfaction with the 3 status quo parties especially. You know, they spend more time tearing each other down than talking about how to build Ontario up. That's the kind of change I want to bring to Queen's Park. How can we work together for the people of Ontario?
Okay, and so Mike Schreiner here hoping to get the results, some results that will favor him in the next few hours or so. We'll keep updating you guys back there at the desk.
Okay, that sounds good. Camille Kermali, thank you for that. You know, the Greens weren't in the debate, but they've been running candidates in Ontario for decades. So this could be really big for the Green Party.
And they were upset. And I was at the debate, and they had a sizable contingent there with tape over their mouths and upset about this. But if Mr. Schreiner is able to do what the polls suggest that he can do tonight, which is breakthrough and win, it means that next time around, if we do go to the polls in another 4 years, as a majority, that the consortium, and that's who decides who's in. The rules are you have to have candidates in every riding, and you have to have an elected MPP in the House.
Which there was an independent MPP in the House, but that was a different reason. That was
there's a Trillium. At dissolution, there was one member who was a Trillium Party member, but the reason that the Trillium Party wasn't in is that was a person who crossed the floor, was not elected as a Trillium
So
Party.
It's a very different
Jack
thing.
McLaren.
But now, if he does get this seat, I mean, you can assume he'll probably be in the debate next time
Schreiner,
around.
yeah.
Mr. Schreiner, if he does get in.
We want to bring our panel back in here now. What do you think about the Green Party and whether or not a surge in votes for them, I mean, traditionally 5%, if it comes up higher, that could have a real impact in a lot of ridings? Deb.
I agree with you. I think it will. I think the votes generally will come from probably the New Democratic Party. Where it will matter to Conservatives is if we are in a 3-way race.
Yep. Yeah, I see it the same way. I mean, anybody can go out and start their political party and vote for the party of their choice. But I would say that what it does de facto in many places would be to aid the election of a progressive Conservative government. We're already experiencing this with the declining Liberal vote, draining or dividing the progressive vote, and so to further divide it makes it more difficult.
A hold your nose situation, Omar, where you're going to go and it's like, I don't like these two, and I can't vote Liberal. Hey, Green, I never picked one of those before.
I think it's unlikely. I think we may see Mr. Schreiner win in Guelph only because the Green Party, unlike the other 3 parties, can channel all of their resources, which are fairly significant. They get public funding. Like the other 3 parties, they can channel all of those resources into one riding. We saw Elizabeth May federally elected in BC. We haven't really seen a green surge across the country after that.
Okay, panel, our wonderful audience, I want to show you something really cool now. We're going to go to our virtual studio where Eric Sorensen is going to show us this little map he made. He'll give us a little tour. Eric, over to you.
Farah, well, you know, this map is going to look very different from what it looks like right now later in the evening because it will start to populate with colors. 124 different ridings will have results tonight. Just to give you a sense of what to expect, in Northern Ontario, the NDP is expected to do well, but in Southern Ontario, the Conservatives in most of those rural ridings are the ones that are expected to do pretty well against the competition. And as you can see, there are many more rural ridings in Southern Ontario than there are rural ridings in Northern Ontario, so advantage Conservatives. Now, looking at some of these regions more closely, down in southwestern Ontario, this is a very competitive area for the NDP in the big cities. Windsor, there are 2 ridings there, and there are 3 ridings in London, Ontario, the smaller ones that we see here. They are going to possibly win all 3 in London, but for the NDP to be competitive tonight, they needed to do well in some of those town and country ridings like Sarnia and down in Chatham. Now, moving over to South Central Ontario, again, the NDP has got to just about run the table on the smaller ridings, the urban ridings, that takes you from Brantford through Cambridge into Kitchener and into Waterloo. But in the bigger ridings, again, the Conservatives have the advantage in places like Haltom and Norfolk that are right on Lake Erie. Swinging over to the Golden Horseshoe, this is where you get into some real battles between the NDP and the Conservatives. For example, in Niagara Falls and Niagara Centre, the NDP should do well there. They may take St. Catharines from Jim Bradley and the Liberals. That would be an historic change. But again, the bigger ridings swinging around Hamilton and up into Oakville, this is where the Conservatives start to make their impact in ridings where they have not done well recently, but they can start to do well tonight. Because if we go into the greater Toronto area, this is where we expect to see the race could be won. The Conservatives are expecting to try to win in Mississauga ridings. There are 5 of them down here. The NDP may do well in Brampton. There are 6 Mississauga, 5 Brampton. But as you get into Vaughan and Markham and Richmond Hill and Aurora and Newmarket, all of these are places where the Conservatives could be very, very competitive into Pickering and Uxbridge. And then when you come and look at Toronto itself more closely, the NDP may do well there against the Liberals, picking up Liberal seats. But if the Conservatives can start to pick up there as well, again, that's an advantage for them because if they're winning in the rural seats as well as around Toronto, and then they start winning the odd seat in Toronto, boy, their numbers start to pile up. One more region to look at, and that's around Ottawa. Again, the thing we're not talking about much are the Liberals. The Liberals have done well here in the past, as you can imagine, right down to Ottawa Centre. But tonight, in the surrounding areas, in Carleton, in Kanata-Carleton, the Conservatives are most likely to pick up those ridings. If there is a swing tonight, the NDP could be picking up the ones inside Ottawa. You look up here at maybe Ottawa-Vanier. That may be the one spot in this whole region where the Liberals maybe hold on to a seat, but that's the type of night it is for the Liberals, trying to hang on to the odd seat. For the NDP, they've got to run the table across the province because the Conservatives start with such an advantage with all of those rural ridings across Southern Ontario. Back to you, Farah. Alan?
Okay. We're going to thank you so much for that, Eric. And we're going to find out in 35 minutes. We'll see the results start coming in. You have 35 minutes, by the way. If you're sitting at home right now debating whether to go out and vote, 35 minutes until the polls close.
Well, time now for some of our stations to break away with a look at the election closer to home.
All right, we are going to bring in Darrell Bricker. He's the CEO of Ipsos, and if you've watched our newscast, we've had a lot of data throughout this election in terms of where things are going. You and your team have been crunching the numbers. What I'm curious about is there's been a lot of people who said they couldn't decide, but today they had to decide. So when did they decide? Did they decide earlier or did they decide when they got to the ballot box?
It was like a 2-stage campaign, Farah. 43% of the people who voted today said that they decided even before the campaign had started, particularly if they voted for the Progressive Conservative Party, where 63% had already made up their minds. And then in the last week of the campaign, that's when most other people made up their minds. Interestingly enough, mostly Liberals. Today in the ballot box, about 9 or 10% of the people that we interviewed said that they made up their minds just as they went into the voting station.
You know, I heard a lot of that myself, just anecdotally from friends who said, like, seriously, it's going to be a game-time decision for me as I walk in. And Darrell, with all of the calls for strategic voting over the last couple of days, what are people saying about why they voted the way they did?
Well, when we asked them today, about 60% said that they were doing it for positive reasons. They really liked the candidate that we were supporting. But when we asked people, who had the most negative views of voting the way that they did, in other words, they were voting to stop somebody else, it was really high for the NDP, higher than it was for the other parties. So I think today, if you saw strategic voting, you really saw it on the NDP side, trying to stop Doug Ford.
Did most people want to see a majority mandate, a minority government, want to go back to the polls in 18 to 24 months?
Ontarians were split on that, 50-50. You don't get many polling responses that are 50-50, but this time,
wow.
50 times,
50-50
this time. But interestingly enough, 76% of Conservative voters wanted a majority government. The people who are most insistent on a minority government listen to Kathleen Wynne. They voted for the Liberals.
All right, let's get to the money. Let's put some money where our mouths are,
Exactly.
okay? Because if you're a betting man or woman, when you ask people, you got $1,000, place $1,000, pick a winner.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, you know, sort of the crowdsourcing approach to this kind of thing. What do you think's really going to happen if you have to put your own money on the table? 53% of the population told us today is going to be Doug Ford, and it's going to be a majority.
53%, I mean, that's, you know,
well,
those aren't Vegas odds necessarily.
Well, it's similar to what we're seeing in the polls right now. That's basically what's being predicted in all the polls we saw over the space of the last week. But, you know, voters can always surprise you. I've certainly been surprised on broadcasts like this before in terms of what Ontarians are going to do. And right now, I guess they're casting their ballots, and we'll know very soon.
Daryl, was there something in terms of demographics that really stood out to you that just was such an outlier in your data today?
How much the province is splitting between places like downtown and the suburbs and rural and smaller parts of Ontario. It's really becoming a province in which we're seeing a big division between those downtown, particularly university cities, and what the rest of the province thinks. And it's those downtown areas that are really fighting it out between the Liberals and the NDP, and then the suburbs and the more rural parts of the province of Ontario that have really gone blue, and I'm expecting we're going to see go blue tonight.
Okay, we appreciate your insight and glad you're with us tonight. Thanks so much, Daryl.
Thank you.
We want to bring in our colleagues from Global News Radio 640 Toronto. If you're listening to us on the radio, welcome. Tasha Carden is at Doug Ford's headquarters. Now, Tasha, you've been talking to listeners throughout this campaign. What's been their thoughts about a possible PC government?
Well, generally, listeners are tired of the current Wynne government. That was a very clear message. When it comes to the PC alternative, many of them don't seem to care, for example, that the PCs don't have a costed platform. It's really about a trust to clean up the mess. There's listeners who have said to me, you know, Doug Ford is the guy because he has experience in business, he's experience at City Hall in Toronto, we trust him to do this. On the other hand, there are some people who have really had a virulent reaction against Doug Ford who say, no, I want to vote PC, but not for him. So it's kind of a mix of the two, but more of our listeners, I would say, were leaning Ford's way than not.
Okay, Tasha, thank you so much for that. We have Alex Pearson also from 640, host of On Point. She's at Andrea Horwath's headquarters. Alex, how do you think the NDP's handled this campaign?
I think they've done a relatively good job. I mean, this was a first real big test for Andrea Horwath because, you know, she kind of had no competition from the Liberals that were pretty much dead on arrival. And so she had a relatively good campaign. The big issue for her was dealing with all these candidates that kept coming up with either, anti-mining or Hitler memes or all these anti-poppy. So she had to really balance her campaign with what is she going to do in supporting her candidates versus, dealing with the media constantly asking about them and knocking her off message. And she chose from very early on, Farah, to stand by her candidates, which I think in some senses hurt her because people were like, it brought this attention to her candidates that I don't think that they were expecting. It also raised questions about experience. Do they have experience on the bench? Will these people be able to do the job? And they also became much more highly scrutinized. And it wasn't until that scrutiny came in that I think about a week and a half ago that we started to see the Orange Crush kind of slow down as more people started to look at the who in fact would be able to do the job. And that, of course, is at the time of the campaign when Doug Ford brought out his bench strength to say, hey, you might not like me, but at least look at my people that I can, put on the ground and they can instantly run. So did she run a good campaign? I think she did, in fact, run a very good campaign. She did go relatively unchallenged. However, it's a win-win for her either way tonight, because if she becomes the opposition, they're in very, very good standing.
With many, many, many more seats. Okay, thanks, Alex.
You're watching Decision Ontario. The time is 8:31.
.640's Matt Gurney. He's the host of Exchange, and he's spending the evening at Kathleen Wynne's headquarters. Matt, what's your take about how tonight's going to play out for the Liberal Party?
Well, I think honestly by this point, I think we have a pretty good sense that even the Liberals themselves have recognized how it will turn out. As someone was joking to me earlier, we're waiting tonight for the second concession, the first one coming 5 days ago. And I guess we'll just have to see whether or not they've been able to hold on to even official party status, which is like the third goal they've set for themselves over the course of this campaign. At first, the Liberals might have told you, hey, look, voters, they're not going to like the PCs. They're not going to like the New Democrats. They're going to come back to us. And then they pivoted from that. They started to talk about, you know what, no, what we're going to focus on is sending enough Liberal MPPs back to Queen's Park to hold the balance of power. And from there, we've revised that even just to a full holding official party status for the Liberals. So I think there's no real expectation of good news tonight. There is some hope that maybe bad news can be avoided, but even the definition of bad news is something that has changed a lot over the course of the last 4 weeks.
Matt, everyone at this desk knows that you're a big Star Trek fan. We were wondering if you could put it in a Trekkie reference for us. Maybe tonight, what's going to happen?
A pretty obscure one. Yeah, here's the problem. I'm not even, someone took this away from me on Twitter already, so I can't even use it originally, but it's going to be the Battle of Wolf 359. Alan, I think, knows what I'm talking about here. Also, I want to say the real speculation here tonight actually has nothing to do with the politics. The real buzz is how many times Alan's going to take his glasses on and off over the course of the broadcast. That's what we're excited about tonight. That's what we're all waiting to hear
over
for.
under, we have bets on that, so all right, thank you.
Okay, well,
there we
let's
go.
talk about some of the pivotal moments in this campaign and talk about when things began to shift and change. And we've heard a couple of things raised, but these are the 2 points that I think things completely changed. And one of them was on May the 28th, as I have to put my glasses back on to see that, May the 28th, when suddenly the PCs shifted in their campaign strategy. Prior to that, it had been Doug Ford is the Progressive Conservative Party, and the Progressive Conservative Party is Doug Ford. Then this happened. It's kind of like a Last Supper sort of a deal here, with Ford in the middle, flanked by all the heavy hitters in his party that he says he's going to bring to government. There's Vic Fedeli, Caroline Mulroney, and no mistake, right on the other side, Christine Elliott, the leader that a lot of people, a lot of conservatives wished the party had picked. It would have been a lot easier for them to be able to get into government. At this point, as soon as Ford does this, his sliding and the slipping of votes stops, and he stops the bleeding. Now, the other, of course, key moment in all of this comes a little later in the campaign. This, of course, we've talked a lot about it. On Saturday, a surprise by Kathleen Wynne. She gets emotional, standing in front of these kids playing in the playground, saying, I'm not going to be the premier. We really haven't ever seen anything like this. The only other time we can think of this in recent Canadian history, Ujjal Dosanjh did it in British Columbia in 2003, the same sort of thing. His party ended up with only 2 seats in that election. We're going to have to see whether or not that is the fate of the Liberals tonight.
All right, we have our insider panel here with us, and I want to talk about equality when it comes to candidates, male and female candidates. We know that the Green Party and the NDP have more women than men running. We also know the Liberals are almost equal. The PCs have a third. Something really cool, I don't know if we have these boards yet. I want to show you something. There are 3 ridings in the province, Cambridge being one of them, where all 4 of the candidates are women. Let's take a look at the next board here. And this is the same situation in Kitchener Centre, where we have all 4 of the candidates being women, and in one more riding as well, where 2 city councillors are running against 2 women from the pharmaceutical industry, Glanbrook, excuse me. So I want to turn it over to you. Given the parties, it's more popular with men than with women, historically has been. Why not make that effort to put more female candidates out there?
Well, I think we have made an effort, without a doubt. But our party has never believed, and I certainly support this, in the notion of setting quotas. And I know the Liberals tend to favor that. When you look at the federal Liberal Party, Prime Minister Trudeau felt that it was important to say 50% of my cabinet are women. I just fundamentally disagree with the notion of setting quotas. And there's tons more we can do to encourage more women. You're seeing it, without a doubt. But I think putting an artificial quota on that isn't really the way to go.
Tom, did your party have a quota?
No,
I mean, you have more female candidates than anybody else.
More women than men. 56% women. But there's no quotas. Members come together and they choose. It's just reflective of the members. Unlike the other parties, there's no ability in the NDP constitution to appoint candidate, unless it's after the writ and emergency at the end. I believe there's an exception. But in normal circumstances, no. So what has to happen in the New Democrats is that there has to be a process of search that looks at different people and makes sure that there are a number of people that are interested in the nomination. And then it's up to the members to make a decision. And this is the way it's turned out. So good for them.
Omar, why is it important to have an equal cabinet?
Well, because you want to have representative government, right? I think, and it has to be representative. It has to have gender balance. I think it also has to have regional balance, but also multicultural balance. You know, we have a lot of communities, ethnic communities living in Ontario. They need to be represented at the table. One of the things, you know, in the Liberal Party, we don't have specific quotas either. But one of the things that we do have is something called the Margaret Campbell Fund, named after a former cabinet minister, Ontario Liberal cabinet minister. And the Premier and Matthews, the campaign co-chair, and others actively campaign to support this organization, to raise money and support female candidates looking to run for office within our party.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Thank you all for your response to that question. I want to go to David Akin now. And David, you're going to be showing us something new with these election poll-by-poll results.
Yeah, so political geeks, come on over. We've got a new tool to look at ridings and try to understand how the election's going. And remember, in this election, we got 124 new ridings, most of which are brand new. The electoral map's been completely redrawn. How might that affect things? I want to show you a riding up in the Ottawa area. It's Kanata Carleton. It's right here. This is the map right here, poll-by-poll results from 2014. Just to orient you, here's Ottawa proper, Kanata Carleton. Now you might think, oh, it's blue, and yes, it's got a history of going conservative. But let's zoom in a little bit here. And look at this. These are small polls in the urban area part of this riding. They're mostly Liberal. As this riding urbanizes into rural Ontario, and this is like a lot of big cities are growing into urban areas, they become more progressive. Kanata Carleton could happen tonight. We're going to track that, and when we get some live results in, of course after 9 o'clock, we're going to populate this and see if the red band here in the urban area of Kanata Carleton can expand. There's one other wrinkle, and let's bring up the big picture for Kanata Carleton tonight. Mary Lee Fullerton is the Progressive Conservative nominee here. Jack McLaren is the incumbent, but he was a PC MPP, got kicked out because he had a Me Too problem, and he's running as an independent. He might pull away enough votes that should go to Mary Lee Fullerton to perhaps let the Liberal Stephanie Magnum come up the middle in this new urbanizing kind of riding, Kanata Carleton. My friend John Hanson running again. He's a perennial runner for New Democrats, likely not to be a factor in Kanata Carleton. This is really a race for the Conservatives to lose. Alan, Farah.
Okay, thank you. Now, you know how tight this race has been if you've been paying attention to it. And Eric is going to show us another tool that we're going to use to explain this horse race to you, and that is our majority meter over here. By the way, 20 minutes until polls close. Over to you, Eric.
Yep, and as soon as the polls close, we're going to expect that they're in the starting blocks right now, and then the race begins to get to 63 seats in a majority, so that the PCs, the Liberals, the NDP will be racing to get to 63 seats and to break through. That is a majority when there are 124 seats. Now, what the two parties that are not winning are going to want to do is to stop the leading party from getting to 63. If they can pull it back from 63, that means the other two parties will have more than 63. Unless, of course, you end up with 62, and then you could have a tie, and you don't even want to think about that. But the idea is one party wants to get to 63 seats, then it's an easy call. It's a majority government. But if it's something short of 63, who's going to talk to whom about what would be a hung parliament, and who's going to then be able to command the confidence of the House to get that majority with more than one party? Back to you, Farah. Alan?
Is that the plan?
All right. Thanks very much, Eric. And we want to talk now with David Akin a little bit more about the NDP and
the path to power.
And, you know, as we look at how they could possibly achieve government, there are some key places where, like you're saying, you're going to have to win where you've never won before.
Right. So Daryl explained this idea of efficiency of vote. The NDP support right now is concentrated in a few regions of the province. PC support is more spread out. The NDP are going to do very well tonight, I think, in southwestern Ontario. Take Highway 6, draw a line from Owen Sound down to Niagara Falls, and that is what we'll call the Rust Belt. A lot of manufacturing job losses. The NDP are doing very well there, concerned about that. It's places in eastern Ontario, rural Eastern Ontario. They break through there. We're going to see something. If we see a New Democrat win in Mississauga tonight, hold on, because that's the breakthrough. Same thing if we see NDP do something in Scarborough. And if they sweep the 5 Bramptons, Tom Parkin's going to be doing somersaults around the floor here.
And in just a couple of moments, we're going to go to the NDP headquarters and talk to their chief of staff, Michael Balagas. He's the guy that told me early on, he said, this is a change election. Yep. This is going to be a change election. The Liberals are not going to be in it. I think just for the NDP and for many other people, the electorate came to that conclusion a lot sooner than everyone expected.
The NDP is going to do very well tonight. There's no question about that. And yet they may still be disappointed because this seemed to be the stars were perfectly aligned for them to seize power. A polarizing candidate on the PC side, a very unpopular Liberal premier. And here was Andrea Horwath, who had some success last time around. And can she take it to the finish line? She may fall a bit short tonight.
She may, and the person who might make it to the finish line, of course, Doug Ford. Jamie Moraker is there speaking to his communications advisor. Jamie, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks so much, Far. You heard it right there. A little bit of a polarizing character in this race. Doug Ford, of course. I'm here with his head of the war room, as they say, Melissa Lantsman. She has been with him since the beginning of this campaign. So, Melissa, communication strategy played a big role in this campaign. We have seen Doug Ford in the past be quite brash, quite forward, and we saw a bit of a toned down Doug this time around. How much of a role did that play for you guys?
Look, I think you saw a Doug that is ready to be premier. And I think that we had to introduce Doug to Ontario. While he's well known in Ford Nation right here in Etobicoke, and while he's well known in Toronto, I think we had the opportunity and the task of introducing him to the rest of the province. And we took that very seriously. And here we are.
So let's talk about this a little bit, and this might be a little bit of inside baseball, but for those who don't know, media was pretty locked down. We got about 5 questions every time there was a media availability. There was not a lot of straightforward answers, we'll say. Was that part of the plan to keep to message?
I don't know if there is a plan to ever keep to message, but Doug Ford is available every single day, doing press conferences, scrums. Sometimes they look organized and they are behind flags, and then sometimes they were outside of a bus. But he was well accessible to the public, and I think the important thing is that we get our message out. That Doug gets to talk to Ontarians about lowering their hydro rates, about lowering the price of gas, about a middle income tax cut of 20%, and that's exactly what we did.
There was a few wrenches thrown in your plan, per se, a few scandals here and there. We had the 407, the Green Belt, then we had a little bit of Ford family drama with that $16.5 million lawsuit. How did you guys push forward as a department and make sure that you guys made it through to this day?
Our job is to our job is really to tell the story of Ontarians really want change, and we gave them that story. We gave them a plan that they can get behind, and hopefully they choose us tonight. But look, we're not the only ones with scandal. We have a radical NDP with a slate of candidates that are questionable. We don't even know which ones they're going to put as ministers, if any at all. And she herself, Andrea Horwath herself, said that they need training school. This is a team that is ready to govern from day one. And look, when it comes to the Liberals, even Kathleen Wynne doesn't want Kathleen Wynne to be premier. So I don't know what you say about that.
All right, thanks so much, Melissa. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. Of course, here at the PC headquarters, they are hoping for a majority government. There are some polls that say they are slated to win a majority tonight. And of course, Ford Nation behind me here, they're excited. They're happy to be here. They're just waiting for Doug Ford to arrive. And that could happen in the next half hour?
I think so.
We could be seeing him here in the next half hour. You can hear they're chanting Ford behind me, so I'll send it back into you guys.
Okay, Jamie, thanks so much for that. Less than 15 minutes till the polls close, but Melissa, you just heard that's who was talking to Jamie there. She's doing her job, communications director. She's getting her talking points out. One of them was that Ford is available. He was available, and you were on the campaign trail. You were at those press conferences. What was that like? Was he available answering questions?
Mr. Ford actually said recently that he's been available more than anybody on this campaign, and that is simply not true.
Okay.
It is simply not true. Mr. Ford takes a limited number of questions at his one availability per day. And the way that the Conservatives handle that is that they stack the back of the room with their own volunteers and their own staff. And when they get to a point where they think that's probably enough, whether Mr. Ford is in trouble or whether they just figure that's it, they just...
And he
And he just leaves.
Okay.
And that's the way they handled it all the way along. A front runner status, keep them, on message, and not too many questions.
And let's break that provincial conservative curse, just not saying anything at the last minute that could jeopardize anything. Now, one person who did, and you told me this, that stood there and answered questions was Andrea Horwath. She stood there, she answered the questions, but is it going to be enough to get her that second floor office at Queen's Park? We're going to go to Mark Carcasole. He's standing by with the NDP's chief of staff.
Farah, that is the hope, the optimism here is that, as Alan mentioned a little earlier, the belief that this is a change election. And the man who said that to Alan at the beginning of this campaign is this man right here, Michael Balagas, the campaign director for Andrea Horwath. Michael, there's been a lot made over the way Andrea went about this campaign. Light on the mudslinging, heavy on the issues, sort of, keeping it light and making sure to draw a clear distinction between her and her opponents. Is this the campaign you wanted? Did this go the way you wanted?
No, it absolutely is the campaign we wanted, and I think the evidence of that is the way Andrea connected with voters. And here we are on Election Day. We're the only party whose vote has grown since this campaign began. She's the only leader whose vote has grown since this campaign began. And we're exactly where we hoped we'd be. And I'm very proud of her, very proud of our campaign.
Someone watching from the outside might say that things really changed for you guys and really ramped up this past weekend when Kathleen Wynne essentially conceded defeat. Do you feel the same way? Did things change, and what changed if that's the case?
Yeah, no, they absolutely did change. And I mean, the biggest change was Andrea is now the only person who can stop Doug Ford from the Premier's office. And that's significant. We know a vast majority of Ontarians do not want him to be Premier. And with Kathleen Wynne stepping out of the way, that really opened the door and made it clear who that person is. And I have said over and over again that we're not going to see the full measure of that decision until tonight, when people get in that ballot box and make their mark. And quite frankly, are there going to be more people turning out tonight who are enthusiastic about a Doug Ford premiership, or are there going to be more people turning out tonight committed to stopping a Doug Ford premiership?
Andrea and her team certainly put on the full court press over the last 3 days, 1,200 kilometers on the road, but a lot of that was focused in the 519, and we know that a large contingent of PC support is in the 905. Was that a mistake? Should they have focused more on the 905 in those last few days?
No, we're doing very well in the 905. We were in the 905. Certainly our field campaign, we shifted a lot of field resources into the 905. And we're pretty optimistic that we're going to do, we're certainly going to do better than we ever have there. And we think that might be the spot where we grind the Conservatives to a halt.
Thank you very much, Michael. Michael Balagas, the campaign director for Andrea Horwath. There you have it. That O word again, optimistic. We will see what happens tonight. We will find out shortly, but there is a lot of positivity here in the room today as people start filing in to see Andrea Horwath. Back to you guys on the desk.
Hope, for sure. Thank you. Supriya Dwivedi, co-host of the morning show on Global News Radio 640 Toronto, joins us now. And Supriya, we were just talking about this. Yeah. You and I, we're old millennials. I might not even really be considered one, but anyway, let's talk about the youth vote.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's talk about it, and I think Daryl sort of touched on this a little bit when talking about giving some people something to vote for rather than to vote against, and we're seeing right now there's a lot of getting out there to vote against Doug Ford from the NDP side of thing, which doesn't historically generally bring out a large youth contingent. Generally, when we have seen a youth quake, if you will allow me to use that made-up term, often it's because the youth are given something to vote for. We saw that with Barack Obama, for example. His presidential run. We saw that as well.
Nancy Calgary.
Had Nancy in Calgary, yes, absolutely. Justin Trudeau here, yeah. Whereas right now, everyone who is, well, not everyone, but a good contingent of the NDP electorate that is getting out there is simply voting to stop Doug. And I don't know if that's enough to convince millennials and Generation Z to really get up off the couch.
I think it's sometimes, sometimes we do a disservice to young people by just assuming that they're going to be on the progressive front. I mean, you look at a guy like Sam Oosterhoff in the Niagara region. He's a staunch progressive conservative. He'll likely win again. Yeah. And even in that riding, all three of the candidates are very young. I think all of them are in their 20s. So I think maybe sometimes when we look at that group, we have to be careful not to say well, they're all going to vote one way.
Sure, and I think that's a good point, but, you know, Sam Oosterhoff, all the credit to him, he's not exactly a representative sample of his age demographic as it is, and I think if you're looking at actual numbers of things...
Is it just because he lived in his parents' basement before?
Well, no, I think there's a lot to live in their parents' basement. But maybe his...
Let's don't bring down living in the basement. Omar over here is still living in mom's basement, so...
Yeah, but, you know...
It's very prominent in the South Asian community.
Exactly. I will give Omar that. Yes, we shall.
I'm 40 and my parents would still love it if I moved back. And they're watching out, and they can attest to that.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think there are different demos, of course, but I think the NDP were really hoping, or are really hoping, the polls haven't closed yet, 8 minutes left, 8 minutes and 45 seconds, that...
Right, so we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, right? There is still a very, you know, there's a chance that the youth will come out, and there's a chance that the youth will come out and then also, you know, propel the NDP to victory. However, if past is precedent, it just becomes a little bit more difficult.
All right, thanks very much, Supriya. I'm just checking my Twitter right here, and Doug Ford has just tweeted a photo of himself sitting on the couch in his mom's basement.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
The results come in, and we're...
How's this for a segue? Erica Vela, right there. She is outside. She's outside the Ford family home in Etobicoke, and this is kind of a tradition for them, right, Erica?
That's right, Farah. Right now, they're inside. They're snacking on some jerk chicken appetizers, some Bombay lamb appetizers. And look at the driveway right now. It is packed with cars. The whole family is here. Ford's wife, Carla, his 4 daughters, his mother, Diane, his sister, Kathy, and brother, Randy. We also just saw Rob Ford's 2 children walk in. So Doug's nephew and niece as well. So there's been a lot of action happening at this house today, getting ready for the big night. I should say it's really not a coincidence that the Fords are starting their night here at his mother's house. I mean, it's in Etobicoke, it's the heart of Ford Nation, but it's also the place where this whole journey really started. If we look back to this past January, it was the home that Ford announced his bid for the PC leadership race. He went on to win that race, and now we're here, election night. But we won't be here all night. In fact, he's planning on heading to headquarters sometime soon, and we will be sure to follow him there, and that's where we'll continue our coverage. I'll send it back to you.
Okay, Erica Vela reporting. Thanks for that. We're going to go...
Just before we do that,
yeah, sure.
I just want to mention from Erica's coverage, we actually have a vehicle with a camera mounted on it. And when Mr. Ford leaves his mom's home and drives over to the Congress Center, we're going to follow him live.
We're with you. Yep.
And I don't know who's driving that car, but it's going to be like, you know, think of the OJ chase. The slow...
But on the ground.
Not in a felon chasing a felon kind of way. Let me just be clear about that.
You're going to go to the 407 now.
All right.
That's what we want to know.
Okay, I'm going to cut this off right now because I want to go to our Karen Lieberman. She is at a race that a lot of people are watching in Brampton. Guritan Singh is running. He is, of course, Jagmeet Singh's brother. A lot of controversy surrounding this one, though.
Yeah, there was indeed, Farah. Guritan Singh, he had this sign, this protest sign that came up during the campaign. Not the most flattering. It was him holding an anti-police sign. However, Andrea Horwath stood by him, and hey, he's got something that the other candidates, no other candidate in this race has, and you mentioned it, it's his big brother, Jagmeet Singh, who's been right by his side as well, campaigning for him. In fact, this riding, Brampton East, is made up of 2 former ridings, and one of them was held by big brother Jagmeet. So he's well known here, and Guritan Singh now has his star power as well, following in Big Brother's footsteps. Now, the Liberal candidate who's running in Brampton East also has a well-known name here. He's a doctor, and healthcare is big in Brampton. Brampton has, of course, Brampton Civic Hospital, which is the busiest emergency room across Canada. So healthcare top of mind. Not only is Parminder Singh a doctor, though, he also brought Hockey Night in Canada in Punjabi. So a lot of fans for him. However, Brampton East is one of 5 ridings in the Brampton area. The other 4 all went Liberal last time. So those, arguably, 4 ridings up for grabs for either the NDP or the PCs. And it's important, finally, to note here tonight that in the last 6 straight elections, the winning party took most seats, the highest number of seats in these suburban areas. Enter the 905. That's why this is a key battleground tonight. And let me leave you with one thought, Farah and Alan. Guess what drink they're serving here tonight? Orange Crush, of course.
Orange Crush. See, I thought it was going to be Mango Lassi because that's also orange,
Sure.
and that would work better, but that's okay.
That's a little more on point, I think.
would think.
I
and
think.
delicious.
All right, time now for some of our stations to break away with results closer to home. We are less than 4 minutes away now from the polls closing, so people who are in line maybe get a chance to vote right now, but if you're not out there, it's about to close up shop, and that means we're going to get results very soon. Our Global News election analyst, Barry Kay, is going to be pouring over all of these results once they start pouring in. And Barry, in terms of what you're expecting to see tonight, how bad is this going to be for the Liberal Party?
Oh, the Liberals don't have a safe seat in the province. We have a projection through Laurier, the lizpop.ca, which had them down to 4, but there have been other projections showing they might be as low as 1 or 2. There are a couple of seats in the Toronto area where they're in a little better shape, the Vaughan riding, the riding of St. Paul's, perhaps University Rosedale, perhaps some of the Don Valley East, but they're not going to win all those. Also, one riding in the Ottawa area. Ottawa-Vanier is the one seat outside of the Toronto area where I think they have a reasonable chance to win. But my guess is they're going to be short of the 8 seats required for the official party status, and they may be closer to 0 at the end of the evening.
You know, Barry, there's a lot of talk about the volatility in the electorate over the course of this campaign. Was that reflected in the numbers that you saw, or had people actually made up their mind earlier than perhaps the prognosticators have been thinking?
Some had made up their mind early, but this is a campaign not just that the Liberals did terribly in, and that goes without saying, but in fact, a month ago, or at least at the end of April, the Conservative Party was at 43%. The most recent polls show they're now at about 37 or 38%. This has not been a strong campaign for Doug Ford. Fortunately for him, there was more antipathy toward Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals. But this isn't a campaign, at least, that the Conservatives can take great pride in. And frankly, it's the fourth. They're quite possibly going to win the election. They're quite possibly going to get a majority. But this is the 4th campaign in a row, 07 with Tory, and then 11 and 14 with Hudak, where in fact the party has lost support during the campaign. And that's part of the reason why the NDP has done so well. Many people are turned off of Conservatives as well as the Liberals.
All right, Barry Kay from Wilfrid Laurier, thank you so much for your analysis. We'll get back to you once we start seeing those results pour in.
You know, this seems to be an election where a lot of people aren't happy. You know, a lot of people are saying they're holding their nose and voting. There seems to be that consensus, at least. What does this say about your leaders, and what does this say about politics in general? Deb?
Well, I still believe that this campaign has been all about change. And it's been change from the Liberals, which wasn't just about Kathleen, but also about what she and Dalton McGuinty before her had done in the province. And so people were looking for change. I don't think voting for someone who brings true change, which I think Mr. Ford does, I don't think anyone argues that that's not the case, is a negative vote whatsoever. I actually see that as voting for something, and I think that is the case in the votes that are going tonight to the Progressive Conservatives.
Tom, I asked Andrea this very question in the day before the vote. I said, you know, what does that say about politics? What does it say about you that we have so many people in this province say, I don't like any of these people?
That is always a part of politics, but to win, you have to have the 2 parts. You need to have, and this is why I said the most important thing Andrea Horwath did for herself was decide to have a detailed and costed platform that she could show to everybody.
With a $1.4 billion problem mistake in it.
It was still an important plan, and the only one that stood up to scrutiny at the end of the day. So the important thing here was it inspired her own folks, and it showed a path and a will to become a government. That's the inspiring side. Now, there's a lot of people who are not very inspired, or inspired in a bad way, I guess, by Mr. Ford, and they're trying to find a way to avoid that outcome. But it's a mix of the two, emotions, a mix of the hope and optimism, but also there's fear in there.
All right, thanks very much, guys. It is 9 o'clock. You are watching Decision Ontario. You are watching Decision Ontario. We're coming to you live tonight from downtown Toronto at our Global News studios at Corus Quay. Well, in most ridings, the polls have now closed and the counting has begun. Over the next 10 minutes or so, we should begin to see the results of your vote.
And whether you're watching us live on television, maybe you're streaming us online at globalnews.ca, or maybe you're listening to us over Global News Radio, we are your #1 source for tonight's election. Welcome.
Well, now, for those of you watching us, at the bottom of the screen there, you can follow along on the overall race with the leading and elected count. And we are expecting results to come in very quickly tonight. We have some delays in a couple of ridings that will delay the overall results, but we are expecting with electronic voting that these results will come in quickly. Now, below there, you're going to see the individual riding races. The very latest numbers for all 124 seats up for grabs tonight. We're going to cycle through those alphabetically, and for our radio friends, don't worry, we'll keep you updated as well.
Some big things are in play for this election. For how much things could change, let's check in with Eric Sorensen.
Every election writes a new chapter in a province's political history, and tonight will be no different. The makeup of the Ontario legislature will change, and so will many of the people who govern this province. The majority of members elected to the 41st Parliament in 2014 were Liberals. How different will it be in 2018 for the Progressive Conservatives and the New Democrats? And there will be 17 more MPPs. Here is the outcome from 2014. The NDP in orange was dominant in the north. Progressive Conservatives in blue swept most of small-town, southern, central, and eastern Ontario. The Liberals in red dominated most urban centres, most decisively in the Greater Toronto area, where they secured their majority. Tonight, we start all over again with a clean slate and with new ridings. To give Northern Ontario a greater voice, a change to this: Kiiwetinoong and Mushkegowuk, James Bay, 2 new ridings in the north. In the south, 15 more ridings. For example, Brampton and Mississauga had 8 ridings in the last election. Now together they have 11, with huge population growth around Toronto. Tonight, Ontario's legislature will change from 107 to 124 MPPs, making the threshold for a governing majority 63 seats.
Now, while we wait for the results, I know it's a tense wait for everyone involved. Jamie Morocker, she's standing by at PC headquarters. There she is, Mark Carcassole in the middle there with the NDP, and Shalima Maharaj is with the Liberals at the Liberals headquarters. Jamie, we're going to start with you, and you're joined by someone who's been with the Ford family for a long time, the Chief of Staff of Doug Ford's late brother, Rob Ford.
That's absolutely right. A very long time. He's seen the Fords through their mayoral race and through the leadership race, and now for this, heading for premier in the last few minutes. Those polls are going to start coming in very quickly. I'm with Amin Massoudi. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff for the leader. Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
So, like I said, you've known the Fords for a very long time. We have talked already about how we saw a very different Ford this campaign than we did during the mayoral campaign. Can you tell me a little bit, though, about some of the catchphrases that came up? Radical NDP, friends, folks, the way he talked, you were actually responsible for some of that.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're seeing a Doug Ford that's very focused, and his message has been pretty clear. I think we've been trying our best to keep very consistent on the message and just put out a plan that we think reflects the priorities that people in Ontario want to see. In terms of some of the catchphrases, you know, I work on the speeches, and I say, you know, my job is to put it in his words, and a big part of that is just reflecting who he is, and that's just how he talks. He's a real guy, and that's what we're trying to bring through and convey in the speeches that he's delivering, and I think that comes through for the most part.
So a man for the people is what he's presenting, but how do you sell somebody like Doug Ford to the white-collar conservative?
You know what? I think Doug's message appeals across a lot of lines. Party lines, geographic lines. People from all different walks of life are flocking to Doug right now. We're seeing an incredible GOTV effort, hundreds of people on the ground, volunteers coming out from all walks of life, and I think that reflects a message that people are really resonating with, and it speaks to the priorities that Doug has campaigned on, and I think it's something that a lot of people in this province are feeling the pressure that they're under financially. They want relief from the high tax burden in this province, and Doug's the guy that's going to deliver that for them. So hopefully we're going to have a victory tonight. That's what we're feeling.
All right, thank you so much, Amin. Hoping for a majority government here in Ford Nation. You can hear how excited they are behind me. I'll send it back into you guys.
Okay, Jamie, thanks so much. We have some results to show you. Look at the bottom of your screen. We've been telling you, take a look. The NDP, 6 seats.
Yeah, the PCs with 5, the Liberals with 2. This is just obviously leading at this point. This is just early information. We can get you some new results now coming out of Simcoe Grey. Here's a look where Jim Wilson, who is the former interim leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, this should be a very safe blue seat. And as you can see, with only 3% of the polls reporting, Mr. Wilson is going to be probably very likely making a return trip to Queen's Park.
He's gone through this quite a few times.
He has,
right,
indeed.
Right, he's experienced at this. Mark Carcasole is at Andrea Horwath's headquarters. Mark, I just want to point out, I don't know if you've seen, but we are projecting 6 seats for the NDP leading elected. I know it's still very early.
I'm seeing that now, and so is everyone here, Farah. Just less than 30 seconds ago, you heard a little bit of that, what you just heard here. As the numbers continue to climb, people seeing that the NDP are in the lead right now with 6 seats thus far. A real sense of optimism here, and they're starting to let in the normal people now, if you will, the voters, the NDP supporters, not the political operatives or the staff, but the actual people who voted, people like Patty. I want to bring in Patty, a Hamilton resident. Patty, we were speaking a little earlier, lifelong NDP supporter, but you say that this election took on an added importance for you. You stepped in and you really fought for the party this time around.
Absolutely. I've done as much as I can to support Andrea and support the whole campaign, because we're really in it to win it this time.
What was it about this one that made you decide to volunteer and really, hit the ground and get out there for them?
I always do volunteer when I can, but this time Doug Ford cannot be our premier. He cannot.
Are you confident that she can do that? We're hearing that, she could be a strong second place. Still not a lot of people convinced she can be premier, though.
I think it's her time. She could be a strong second place, but I think she could be even stronger as a first place. She'd be an amazing premier.
We hear everyone cheering back here, and I want to direct your attention to the monitor below us here. You're seeing these numbers, 11 PC, 10 NDP, 4 Liberal. How do you feel looking at these numbers? Still very early, but how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel great. We know that all along it's been a really tight race. We've been neck and neck the whole time, and so to see that we still are tells me that we have a really good shot at this.
All right, Patty, thank you so much. Thank you for talking to us. Appreciate your time. Guys, there you can see it, the numbers bouncing back and forth, and a lot of support, a lot of optimism here at NDP headquarters. We will see how things go as time goes on. Back to you.
Mark, thanks so much. I just want to point out that Mark was looking, and things just changed right when he was talking. The PC's now at 24, the NDP at 16. The Liberals have 5 seats, 3 away now from official party stats, which is, of course, what they want tonight. They want more than that. But we want to talk about the bigger picture. We're going to go to Eric Sorensen with that map in our virtual studio with more. Eric, how does it look?
Farah, you're already beginning to see things take shape. As we were saying, the NDP would expect to do well in the north right now. Thunder Bay, Atikokan there in front, Temiskaming, Cochrane as well. Let's come on down to Southern Ontario. This is where we had said the Conservatives are likely to do better in rural Southern Ontario. And look at that, all of these big ridings. There's Parry Sound, Muskoka. You've got Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, and then all the way down to Chatham. This is an interesting thing down in the southwestern Ontario, because this is where you would expect the NDP to be very competitive if they're going to try to defeat the Conservatives tonight. But look at that, Sarnia-Lambton, the Lambton County, as well as Chatham-Leamington, all kind of going towards the Conservatives right now. But let's also look into Toronto, because you can see those tiny ridings. Look at that. There are some of those Liberal ridings that, I mean, it's very early to say, but there are at least 4 Liberal ridings in the Toronto area and the GTA. Vaughan Woodbridge is the one just on top of Toronto there. This is Don Valley North. That is a brand new riding. I think we have the board for that one. Let's have a look and see what that says to us. Don Valley North, Shelley Carroll is leading there. This is the new riding. None of these, of course, are brand new because people have been voting there for years, but they've created a new riding, so there are now 3 Don Valley ridings. Shelley Carroll with a 3 percentage point lead. Look at how few votes there are. Only 2% of the polls reporting, so her lead is only about 40 votes. So you can't read too much into that right now, but if you're the Liberals and you were worried about getting shut out, it's nice to see a little bit of red on that map. Farah, Alan?
Hi, thanks so much for that, Eric Sorensen. Now you can see the Greens with 1. Again, these are leading and elected, so we're going to get a closer look at that in terms of how many have actually been elected. So these are, again, very early numbers. But let's go to David Aiken right now. He's looking at London results. David, why is London significant?
Well, because we've got some radio listeners down there in London on Global News AM 980. We'd like to say, or 580, pardon me. We'd like to say hello to those folks and give you what's up to speed in London. London's an important part of this province. Some seats could flip here. Elgin Middlesex London, first of all, the incumbent there Jeff Urick is leading. He's got 51% of the votes, but very early, just 3% of polls reporting. Amanda Stratton of the NDP is in second. Elgin Middlesex London turning out as it should. Same thing in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. Monty McNaughton, the Progressive Conservative, former leadership candidate, leading right now with 5% of the polls reporting, and he's got almost half the vote. NDP Todd Case is in second place in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. London Fanshawe, NDP incumbent here, and Teresa Armstrong, as we have no polls reporting. This is one of the few no polls reporting. Teresa Armstrong, the incumbent, she's waiting to see what happens tonight. 0 polls right now in London Fanshawe. London North Centre, this is the riding up for grabs. Deb Matthews' old stomping ground. Terry Kernaghan is leading, 45% with 11% of the polls in. That's a significant chunk, and he's up by a fair amount on Susan Troupe, the former Conservative MP. So NDP over the PCs. And in London West, Peggy Sattler is elected with 57%. Peggy Sattler elected with 57%, beating what turned out to be a controversial Conservative candidate, a radio host in his day, Andrew Lawton. So Peggy Sattler is our first elected, leading in the other London riding, London Fanshawe. We don't have any results there. And the results around London, both PCs, as we expected. So hope you're tuning in online, on radio, and now back to the really pretty people on TV. That would be Alan and
now see that kind of... That kind of soap job will get you everywhere. Thank you very much, David. I appreciate that. And you just see some of those early results coming in. And I want to take a real quick now at Don Valley. And there's 3 ridings, and Eric touched on a couple of them. But we have results here. This is Don Valley East, where Denzil Minnan Wong is in the lead, but not by much. I mean, it's early going here, but this could indicate that that the Liberal vote has solidified and strengthened, because Mr. Coteau is right there. Of course, he's a Liberal minister. Here is Shelley Carroll. We talked about this one previously. She is trailing here, but could the Liberals hold Don Valley North? And I know you know this riding because we talk about it all the time. It is the third of the Don Valleys. Don Valley West, a certain Kathleen Wynne is the representative here. And right now, she is trailing. Now, it is close with 17% of the vote in, but right now, Kathleen Wynne is trailing in her riding.
How important is it for candidates to get their seats? I mean, we're seeing here she's up against somebody who knows the hydrophile quite well. So talk to us about that. Deb.
Well, as I said earlier, I think Kathleen Wynne did herself in her own riding, quite frankly, with her announcement on Saturday. We'll see. It is possible that the Conservatives are able to take all 3 of these seats.
And before we get to more on that, here's another leader and an update to Andrea Horwath. We can declare her elected in Hamilton Centre. The leader of the NDP, who first won that riding in a by-election, is back. Tom, to you. Obviously, it's important to have your leader win.
It's important to have the premier with a seat, yes. What's interesting about what we saw when we were looking in the Southwest was exactly how low the Liberal votes were. These are PC, NDP fights in London and Sarnia, Windsor, Chatham, Wallaceburg, all those centres. And we're seeing Liberal votes of 5% and 7%, very low. So the NDP has to really work hard.
I just want to interrupt you for 1 second. Take a look at that bottom number. Remember, 63 is the number needed for a majority government, and things are leaning toward the PCs at 68. It's still early, and these are still leading in elected projections. NDP at 33, Liberals at 9, party status 8. That was the main number there at your...
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think to maintain that number, which is 8 or above, I think we need to do well in Thunder Bay. We need to do well in downtown Ottawa, downtown Toronto, and pick up a couple in the 905 and maybe in Eastern Ontario.
But look, I mean, look at that majority meter. That horse race was expected to be very, very close, and we're seeing quite a gap there in terms of a majority. Again, 63. Minority versus majority. Does everybody know what that is? Majority means that the government gets to do what it wants. It's not a government of compromise. So that means it would be a government that would last 4 years. A minority government usually lasts between 18 and 24 months, which means we'd be going back to the polls pretty soon.
I just want to update you on the 2 Thunder Bay ridings, because those are so important that Omar talked about, because those are both Liberal ministers there. And I talked to Andrea Horwath this week, and she thought that you might be able to pick up both of them. You don't have a hope. The PCs don't have a hope up in Thunder Bay. Not a chance.
The polls have closed. I'll say yes.
Okay, but you'll admit it. So here's the latest numbers. I have Bill Morrow just leading with 38.4% to 37.8% for the NDP. Bill Morrow leading in Thunder Bay, Atikokan, incredibly close. And same in Thunder Bay, Superior, where Michael Gravel, also a minister, is very, very tight. What does that tell you about the Liberal vote, Tom?
Well, if the Liberal vote stands up, then we're looking at a bigger PC majority. That's the problem. That's exactly the problem, because if the Liberal vote stands up in urban areas where the NDP is strong, then it is draining NDP votes and it's electing PCs.
I don't buy that argument. With all due respect, Tom, you know, the Ontario Liberal Party has won 3 elections in a row, 4 elections in a row, you know, the 3 majorities. The NDP was usually between 20 and 24%. We're probably coming in the low 20s at best tonight. And it looks like the PCs are headed for a majority. You guys could have won a majority if you were able to convince a majority of centrist Ontarians that you're responsible with the economy.
You know what? Like, we're talking about a majority. 72 is what the projection is now for the PCs. I mean, that is not what the NDP wanted today, Tom.
Well, I think it's what the majority of Ontarians wanted today, and that is essentially the problem. We have maybe we're going to get a large majority government out of a 37 or so % of the vote. We don't know. We'll watch.
It's going to be interesting when we see that popular.
It would be interesting. But the thing here is, again,
I want to cut in right here. We have breaking news. Breaking news, a major development tonight. "16 minutes after the polls close, and Global News is projecting a progressive conservative majority government."
We're going to go right to Jamie Mauracher at PC headquarters. He's never served as an MPP, but now he's going to be the premier of the province. Jamie.
Thanks so much, Farah. I've had to put these on because people were cheering so loudly. They are so excited. And boy, did that happen quickly. They were hoping for a majority here at the Congress Centre, Ford Nation, and they got that majority. I'm joined by MPP for Parry Sound Muskoka, Tony Clement. Thank you for being here, Tony.
Great to be here.
What do you think of this? It happened very quickly. It is what the polls predicted, but it basically blew the other parties out of the water.
It happened very quickly. And don't forget, this is a political party that hasn't been in this position since 1999 general election. So they haven't had a successful result this century, if I can be very dramatic about it. So, yeah, people are boisterous. They're excited. This is how they wanted it to be. And let's face it, Doug Ford ran a very disciplined, focused campaign that really kept on the message that he wanted to talk about, a different Ontario for the taxpayers, one where things were affordable and one where government was serving the people.
But I mean, Tony, for a politician, he doesn't have as much experience as some of the other candidates who are in the leadership race. Do you think that he is ready to lead the province?
I think he was very smart in the last few days of the campaign. He not only talked about what he wanted to do, but he emphasized the team that he had around him, the current sitting caucus members, but people like Christine Elliott, Caroline Mulroney, Rod Phillips, who are going to be coming in to the Ontario legislature. So it wasn't all about Doug Ford. It was also about the amazing team that he had available to him, in contrast to what the NDP had to offer.
We'll be seeing Doug Ford as a premier of Ontario. He's going to make his way down here a little bit later, and we will be speaking with some of his family members. I'll have all that for you from the Congress Centre, but for now, I'll send it back inside to you.
Okay, Jamie. Yeah, it must be loud there. Okay, let's go to Mark Carcasole now. He's at NDP headquarters. And Mark, I'm sure the NDP didn't think the gap would be this wide. Just to point out before we go to you, the numbers are fluctuating because not all the polls have reported, but we can say it is a Conservative majority government. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, Farah, I think this was very much unexpected. I mean, people knew that there was a likelihood that Doug Ford would win a majority government, but not at the levels we're seeing right now. I can tell you the mood in here went from a high to an absolute low in a matter of seconds. They started letting in, as we showed you in our last hit, the average everyday people, the voters who were coming in to support the party. There was high optimism. There were cheers, ovations throughout the crowd when it was declared that Andrea Horwath had won her seat. But shortly after that, not 5 minutes later, when it had been declared that Doug Ford had won a majority, just an absolute silence over the crowd. Now, as we watch over this crowd now, there are moments of cheering, there are moments of ovation at times as they cheer for individual, I guess now NDP MPPs who seem to have won their seats. But that jubilation that many were hoping that they would have with an NDP premier, the first one since Bob Rae in 1990, not going to happen this time around. It does appear, though, as though they will be supporting the leader of the official opposition. We'll see how things play out. It is still fairly early, but quite a bit of dejection here. You can see it in some of the faces, especially given how high the hopes were and just how quickly they crashed. Back to you guys on the desk.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark Harkisel. And Alan, you know, it seems like we were just talking to Mark minutes ago, and he was saying there was so much hope in the room. Yeah. Everything happened so fast.
Very quickly, but we do have a developing race right now in Don Valley West. We want to get you up to date on this, where Kathleen Wynne has now pulled back in front in an incredibly close race. Right now, as I'm looking at the most recent numbers, 7,899 votes for Ms. Wynne, 7,532 votes for the PC candidate. Extremely close. This could go back and forth. And as you see, that Liberal number now has been fluctuating. Before it was at 9. Now it's at 7. They need 8 tonight.
All right, we're going to go to Shalima Maharaj. She's at Liberal headquarters. Will they get to that 8 number? Shalima, what is it like there?
That is critical, and everyone is looking at these screens right now. They are glued to them, trying to see if that number is going to come through. Of course, you were talking about Kathleen Wynne's riding. That is being watched very closely. She's supposed to be around here by 10 o'clock to speak to her supporters here. Everyone right now is just stuck to the screens. I can't even begin to describe that. It's not a huge crowd in here. We were told that this room could have roughly about 500 people here. That's certainly not even close to what we've got. We had 30 people at one point. Now we have far more than that. But they are all having a look at these numbers, and they are hoping for the best. They're still fairly early. I mean, I'm looking down at the screen right now. 7 is what we're stuck on at this moment. And so they're really hoping for that 8. That is crucial for them to maintain party status, and they are hoping for the best. And that has been essentially the tone, especially in the last 3 days of the campaign. Being on the bus, they've been going through the 416, through the 905, trying to get as many votes as they possibly can and trying to leave a lasting impression in the dying hours of this campaign. But it really has been quite a fall, especially considering the last 5 years, everything that has gone on. And this has been one uphill battle throughout this entire campaign. It's back to you.
Okay, and again, that number keeps fluctuating. You saw it go back to 8 right now, and all the polls are not in, so you will see the numbers fluctuate just a little bit. But we're going to go to Eric Sorensen. Eric, how did we get here?
Boy, we're still getting there. The Liberals, as you're talking about, they're at 8 right now. One of the things that's helping them are the 2 Thunder Bay ridings may stay Liberal, and that was not some of the things that were expected in the early polling. Even that helps to break things down in a way that breaks nicely for the Conservatives if the NDP and the Liberals are splitting that progressive vote. Let's come on down to Southern Ontario, and you can see that there are still some ridings not reporting, and they are some of the bigger ones. So, you know, when you get into Lake Simcoe area, for example, those could be Conservative ridings too, and they're already around 69 or 70, so that's an advantage to them. But here's where the race is really going the Conservatives' way tonight, down in the Greater Toronto area. Look at how much blue there was. Remember, 2014, it was almost all red. There was one blue Conservative riding. That was Thornhill, right in the middle, just above Toronto. Look at it now, from Vaughan through Richmond Hill, Newmarket, over to Pickering, Uxbridge, all the way into Ajax and Whitby as well. Let's look at the Whitby board just to give you a sense of one of the races where the Conservatives have won, or are winning anyway. It is Rod Phillips leading the NDP, and Joe Dixon, who's been around a long time for the Liberals. He's 78 years old, but Rod Phillips, a high-profile candidate for the Conservatives, leading in Ajax. You can get a sense of the split on the progressive vote there. They're not that far behind if you put them together, but they are losing this race. Mississauga Malton, Deepak Anand leading the NDP by only 2 percentage points. But look at that progressive split, 35 and 20. Together, they have 55% of the vote. If you were thinking of as a progressive, you were trying to stop the Conservatives, that's not happening. And look how close it is. Look how the PCs can kind of come up the middle in some of these ridings. Let's take a look at the popular vote, because this is going to be important tonight. You know, this is where the PCs are now riding higher than many people had expected. The NDP at 34%, the Liberals at 18%. This is going to put the Liberals and the NDP, for example, very close to 60%. There's going to be a conversation when all of this is done amongst progressives saying, how can we have 60, and you add the Greens in, for example, how can we have 60, 65% of the vote on the progressive side of the ledger and lose maybe so badly, at least in the way it's looking tonight? So the popular vote percentage is one of the things that people will be looking at. Back to you, Farah. Alan?
All right, thank you so much, Eric. And I want to look at this riding in Sudbury because this tells a story about the woes of the Liberals. Sudbury, a real problem area for them, as you know. And there's the Minister of Energy, Glenn Thibeault, who actually said in the dying days of the campaign, if you elect me, I'll join whatever party you want. But it didn't work out. Jamie West taking Sudbury back for the NDP. Remember, the NDP won it in 2014, only held it for about 6 months before, of course, the MPP stepped down, and then all those problems.
Wasn't Glenn Thibeault an NDP?
He was NDP.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about how we got here. I mean, I know how you're going to say we got here, Deb, but I'm curious to know from you two how you think Doug Ford got a majority government.
Well, clearly there was clearly the majority of Ontarians wanted change, and I think they wanted change going into this election, and I think they made up their minds probably about a year and a half ago. And Mr. Ford, you know, he's not your typical politician. He's a populist. He was something new and fresh to maybe some folks outside of Toronto. But you know, at the end of the day, as Liberals, you know, this is probably going to be a historically bad result for us tonight. So I think we need to be humble. I think we need to talk to Ontarians in the coming days, weeks, months, even years, and see how we can reconnect with the middle class of this province. I think what we're seeing in a lot of these results in suburban ridings across the province is we have lost the middle class. That's something that we're going to have to do some soul searching about. It's not going to be an overnight process. And I think what Mr. Ford was able to do, despite, you know, policies that I have, you know, extreme disagreements with at times, he was able to successfully speak to middle class Ontarians.
Omar, I'm just going to make a hip-hop reference here and say Kendrick Lamar, you should be listening to Humble. Sit down, be humble, because obviously I think that's what the province has said to the Liberals. Is Doug Ford going to be humble as a leader of this province?
Absolutely. He will recognize that while he looks like he's going to have a majority, obviously, that you never get elected with a majority of the votes usually in our province. That's just the way our electoral system works. And yet you need to govern on behalf of the whole province. And I think you'll see that reflected in his notes tonight when he speaks to the audience at the convention center.
You know, the NDP painted him as the least qualified person to run for premier of this province, but he got the job.
Yeah, it was, well, they tucked him in the background in the last week, and that was probably a good move on the Conservative strategist's part. Because the more you looked at Doug Ford, the more you wanted to vote for Andrea Horwath. And that was driving a lot of the conversation.
Deb's shaking her head.
I'm going to push back on that. So often we talk about candidates who are put in bubbles, who don't talk to the people because there might be an accident that happens. There might be something silly said. Doug Ford was with the people throughout this entire campaign. So he may not have done as many media interviews as Andrea Horwath, but he was out talking to voters.
He was
and
with
I think
some
that's
people.
what you
He was with some people. He was with largely crowds that were partisan supporters. Yeah. But you know,
was he facing the tough questions?
He wasn't facing the tough questions, but clearly it didn't.
Sometimes
clearly
facing
it didn't
them,
matter.
but not answering them.
I think whenever you walk into a crowd, whenever you walk into a crowd, anything can happen, and you guys know that. And that's why so often front runners are kept, as I said, in a bubble. That wasn't the case with Doug Ford at all.
Let me put this out there. I think his best day on the campaign was also his worst day when the Renata Ford lawsuit came out. I think we saw Mr. Ford step to the microphone and speak like a human. He talked about the concern about those two young kids. Yeah. And I think that was the best performance we saw from him.
And for those of us who knew and worked with Kathleen Wynne on a daily basis, as I did for a number of years, that's the Kathleen Wynne we would see every day in the office. You know, for the majority of this campaign, except for with the possible exception of her early concession, we just didn't see that Kathleen Wynne, and you know, I think that's been hurting us tonight.
I just want to point out the ticker again. The Liberals, Omar, sitting, I know you'll be interested in this, sitting at 8 right now. We still don't have all the polls reporting, but we do have the Liberals sitting at 8 right now, and that
and some
one's
very, very tight margins right now, where Liberals are either up by a couple hundred or behind by a couple
and
hundred.
some of the polls, some of the, we're not going to get until later on.
Glengarry Prescott Russell is a potential Liberal hold. That's been delayed, I believe, until about 10 or 10:30.
Right.
York Simcoe, I think, is just closing right now at about 9:30. But Barry Kay standing by with us. He's our election analyst from Wilfrid Laurier. And Barry, as you're crunching these numbers, what are they telling you?
Well, there's a few surprises. Let me mention first, this is a much earlier decision than ever I could remember, and that's largely because of the new voting system. The electronic voting system has produced results much more quickly. The NDP isn't as close to the Conservatives as was expected. Conservatives doing very well, but not always in seats that you would expect. Just in southwestern Ontario, Sarnia was a seat that was thought likely to be picked up by the NDP. They're behind. Kitchener-Conestoga, on the other hand, should have been a safe Conservative seat. It's very close. One other thing I might observe with regard to the Liberals at 8 seats, and if they held 8 seats, they're going to be at least have official party status. But none of those are electeds. Those are all very marginal ridings at the moment. So it's going to be a long night before we're able to determine just how many seats the Liberals are going to be able to pick up.
Yeah, this is one of those interesting situations where we know the major headline, the outcome is going to be a Doug Ford majority government. But it looks, as I just looked through some of these numbers here, we have some very, very tight races. And like you say, those situations where the polls are going to close later. So there's going to be some candidates out there that, you know, the rest of us might be with our heads on the pillow, but they won't even know if they've won or lost.
Certainly up north, yeah, some of those late results. I do think it's fair to suggest, because there's still a number of ridings that aren't even included in the totals that are available on the screen, that the Conservatives are going to be probably at least into the mid-70 range. And that probably means that the NDP at best will be in the low to mid-40 range, where some of the projections, including some that I had done, suggested the NDP would be closer to 50. As for the Liberals, we'll see. The Greens got their 1 seat. I think we're pretty clear that that's it for them tonight. But the Liberal number may vary quite a bit before the night is over.
What are you seeing in terms of popular vote for the Liberals? There's been a lot of discussion, of course, about Kathleen Wynne coming out and saying, I know I'm not going to be premier. What do we see in terms of how did that move the Liberal vote either up or down in this last week?
It's not clear that the Liberal vote is much different than was the case even before that she made the statement. There may be late figures that will suggest something different. The Liberals right now are running, frankly, running better than I anticipated and better than a lot of other people had anticipated. But those are not hard numbers. Those are all leadings. I don't think there's one elected yet among the Liberal seats. And again, it's not all of them are in seats that were expected to win. One of their most popular MPs, Yasser Naqvi in Ottawa Centre, thought to be a prospective future leader of the party. It looks like he's losing to the NDP in that riding.
And of course, he was looking to see if maybe if he could hold on, maybe he would be a future leader of the party. All right, Barry Kay from Wilfrid Laurier, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Barry Kay mentioned this. History has been made in the province of Ontario, and it is the color green. Let's go to Guelph at the HQ for Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, who's won his seat. Camille.
Yeah, Farah, it's been an electric atmosphere here. For the past 5 to 10 minutes, it's just been nonstop cheering. It's quietened down just a little bit. Great, so I can actually hear you. But before that, it was almost deafening. There was fist pumps, there was hugging, there was lots and lots of cheering as Mike Schreiner here has made history. Global News has called it that he will be the MPP for this riding for Guelph. Traditionally, in the past 15 years, a Liberal MPP has taken Guelph, but now it is the color green. I want to show you these people are all waiting for Mike Schreiner. There has been chants of Mike. Everyone's just waiting in anticipation for Mike Schreiner to show up here, but he did want some privacy and he did want to watch the results come in alone with his family. So he will appear in about 10 to 15 minutes time. That's what we've been told, but a crowded room here. And the word everybody's using here is the word history, Farah.
Yeah, definitely a breakthrough for the Greens. They've been running candidates for decades in the province of Ontario, so this is a really big deal for them. Let's take a look now. Thank you, Camille. We're going to go to our leading and elected board now, get a really close look now at how many seats have been elected. You see there the PCs with 71, the NDP with 40, the Liberals at 8 leading, and the Green, that seat is for sure. That's a Green seat.
Here's your popular vote by party, and this is so important. 40% for the PCs, and obviously they have won a majority. Anytime you see that number north of 35, 38 to 40, that's pretty much a guaranteed progressive conservative majority. And look at that Liberal number at 19%, which is pretty much where it was, as you heard Barry Kay talk about. That was pretty much where it was when Kathleen made that shocking announcement, and it didn't seem to move the number at all.
Now that we know that we have a PC majority, the talk is on who will be filling Doug Ford's front bench. Here's David Akin with some potential PC cabinet ministers.
That's right. And of course, for about a week and a half ago, the campaign stopped being about Doug Ford, and we saw some of the bench strength that he's going to rely on to form a cabinet. Let's start with Newmarket Aurora. Christine Elliott, she is elected in Newmarket Aurora, NDP second there. Of course, Christine Elliott is going to be in Doug Ford's cabinet. Once tried to be the leader instead of Doug Ford. She is definitely going to go into cabinet. I'll bet my bottom dollar on that. In Ajax, just next door, Rod Phillips is a first-time MPP, but he's got a lot of boardroom experience. The chair of the Ontario Gaming and Lottery Corporation, Rod Phillips, is leading right now in Ajax, 38%. Monique Hughes has 32% in Ajax. Rod Phillips, 38%. Monique Hughes, NDP, 32%. Let's take a look at Don Valley East. This is going to be a tight race all night. Right now, the current Liberal cabinet minister, Michael Coteau, is leading, but not by much, or they're tied, 35% each with PC candidate Denzel Minnan-Wong. Denzel Minnan-Wong wins. He's almost certainly going into cabinet. That's a 416 cabinet member for the Progressive Conservatives. Got to have that. Lambton Kent Middlesex, another former leadership candidate, didn't run against Doug Ford, ran against Patrick Brown. Monty McNaughton is elected with 55% of the vote. McNaughton elected, NDP second, Liberals third. Lambton Kent Middlesex. Those, one more, Nepean, Lisa MacLeod, she too ran for leadership against Patrick Brown, lost, but she's winning tonight, leading 44% in Nepean. NDP are second, well back at 29%, Liberals third at 20%, and the Greens picking up some as well. I want to look as well at Peterborough Kawartha. No ministers here, well, maybe, who knows? But remember the bellwether riding we talked to you about at the beginning of the night? Peterborough Kawartha sends government MPs and nothing but since 1977. Looks like they're doing it again. Dave Smith there.
Live shots of Doug Ford.
People right across this province, and I want to thank our team and everyone out there, but I'll be speaking very shortly.
Premier-elect, what do you plan to do first in your first business?
Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm going to be doing a press conference tomorrow.
Tell us the moment inside your home when you won. What was that moment like?
Oh, it was great. I'm just very grateful to the people of Ontario. Very grateful.
Did you think you'd get a majority like this?
Something we worked right up to the last minute, and we just appreciate everyone's support. And just can't wait to get to the convention.
Tell us everybody will see you at the Congress Center.
The Congress Center, we'll meet you over there. And thank you. I appreciate it. I want to thank everyone. Thank you.
So there you have it, Doug Ford right now heading to the
So Ford is heading to headquarters right now.
Okay, thank you, Erica. That's Erica Vella, who's there. But there you see him. He is going to be Ontario's 26th Premier, Doug Ford, and he had his wife, Carla, beside him. His kids, I'm sure, heading to the Congress Centre as well.
I just want to get you an update on a couple of quick things. Kathleen Wynne has once again pulled back out in front again with a narrow lead in Don Valley West. And I have to correct something I said earlier. We were talking about the Minister of Energy, Glenn Thibeault, losing his seat. It turns out I got caught up in a little fake news. I said that he'd said that whoever, if he was elected, he'd join whatever party. That was a satirical news site. Not true.
All right. Okay. We're correcting it, though. That's good.
Yeah.
We want to go to the Congress Centre now. That's where Doug Ford is heading. We're going to go to Global News 640 Toronto's Tasha Carden. She's at Doug Ford headquarters. That's probably the biggest party in town tonight.
Oh, Farah, it is. Every time the numbers jumped closer and closer to the 65 mark, the cheers got louder. When they vaulted over to 70, people went completely berserk. It's really going to be a big party. It might be a short night, though, because the results seem so definitive.
You're right, and they came so early there. And what are we expecting? Is he going to be, what is he going to be doing there when he gets there? Giving a speech? Is he going to be giving interviews? What are we expecting tonight, Tasha?
We're not necessarily expecting interviews. We understand he will be giving a press conference tomorrow, but the media were told that was going to be the interaction that we would have. He will be, though, of course, addressing the crowd here, who is very, very excited. A lot of anticipation, a lot of affection for the Ford family among the people who are assembled here, not just, you know, for a change of government. They really have affection for the man himself. So I think he's going to get an amazing welcome for sure.
Okay, thank you for that, Tasha. That's Tasha Karidan from Global News Radio 640. We want to head over to Brampton now at the headquarters for the NDP's Gurratan Singh in Brampton East. Karen Lieberman is there. And Karen, what's happening behind you?
It is loud. It is electric. Farah Gurratan Singh pulled it off here in Brampton East. One of the most controversial and one of the most closely watched races in all of the province. Gurratan Singh, he was marred by controversy during the campaign. His leader, Andrea Horwath, stood by him. But of course, we're talking about the little brother of Jagmeet Singh, the federal NDP leader. And he's had his brother on his side this entire time. And he's got this entire room with him too. And it is packed and the music is pumping. And as soon as they heard that their man Gurratan Singh won, they just went wild. They're screaming now. I believe he's coming soon to make a speech. But keep in mind that the other 4 ridings in Brampton, this city made up of 5 provincial ridings, all going blue. So this is not the orange crush that the folks here in Brampton had been hoping for. It'll be interesting to see how Gurratan Singh moves forward with that and what his big brother Jagmeet Singh thinks of that. Because obviously, he at the federal level hoping for a big win at the provincial level. He was the deputy leader of Andrea Horwath. He looked at her as a mentor, so we're hoping to speak with him as well. But I can tell you that the room here is packed and the people are thrilled at the local level. Back to you.
The bunga dancing hasn't started.
No bunga.
So, but there was when Jagmeet won. So it might happen, Karen. You might see that behind you, just so you know. Saw some selfies happening.
We want to take you live now. This is a live shot. Look at this right here. Big black hulking SUV owned by Doug Ford. And we have the follow cam here. Mr. Ford is making his way, of course, from his mom's basement. We just saw him a couple of minutes ago. He came out from the home and got into the big black SUV, and now he's on his way to the Congress Center. We're staying close behind him here, making sure that he's following all the proper highway rules. And there's a live shot of where he will be showing up not too long from now to address an absolutely ecstatic crowd. You know, if you're a progressive conservative, you know heartbreak. And tonight, Deb, you must be feeling pretty good after 4 elections in a row where you managed to squander it, and this time you managed to pull it out.
You had to just put that little dig in before you said it, eh, Alan? Well, no, this is great news, and I've said a number of times tonight because I believe it. This was an election about change, and we're getting change in the province, and I think it's change for the better.
Deb, can I ask you to put on another hat right now, because you are also the wife of Tim Hudak. In the last provincial election, he lost. So what is Andrea Horwath going through right now? What's that like, being a candidate who lost?
Well, it's tough. I mean, my husband did it, not me, but it is very tough. The difference for Tim in 2014 is that he had made the decision, if he didn't win, that he would be stepping down. Tom may have a better perspective on that, on whether Andrea would announce tonight that she's stepping down or whether she will stay and lead as an official opposition leader. But it is very different if you've decided your career is over. It's a tough speech to give.
And Tom, just before we get your answer on that, I just want to tell people what they're looking at here. This is the shot of the Ford vehicle on its way from the Ford family home on the way to the Toronto Congress Center. What do you think the future for Andrea Horwath is?
Well, she walked into an election campaign where she was somewhere in the 20s in the polls. She walked into an election campaign where we were expecting, where we'd seen polls showing the Ford PCs at 50%, a couple of polls. She turned that around. She got close to Ford. Looks like not close enough, but I'll tell you, Andrea Horwath doubled her seat count tonight. And there is a larger contingent of New Democrats that are going to be in the legislature than there have been, with the exception of the one time when they were elected government. So for her team now, she will provide a very, very strong opposition to some of the tax cut, hospital cuts, teacher cuts, and all the cuts to the infrastructure that I think we're going to be looking at in the next 4 years. She will be there. I think people know her now. They know that they can count on her to be a strong fighter and never give up.
Okay, Tom. We want to go to David Akin now. And David, tell us about some of the ridings where the NDPs have taken over Liberal seats.
Yeah, and so I think, for all the success the NDP is having tonight, I think it is a disappointing night for the NDP. They thought they'd win some more seats, thought they'd have a closer shot at government, but still they're going to take heart in, for example, Davenport. Bit of a grudge match there because the NDP lost that to Kathleen Wynne 4 years ago. Taking it back with style tonight. Marit Stiles elected, 59% of the vote. Stiles is a former president of the federal NDP, and she's a school board trustee. She's going to be a very effective opposition member, no doubt. Beaches East York, this is another riding that the Liberals won in 2014. It was Arthur Potts 4 years ago, won by a handful of votes to defeat the NDP. This time around, Rima Burns-McGowan elected with 50% of the vote. NDP goes in the Beaches East York column, and Arthur Potts only gets a 4-year career as an MPP. Scarborough Southwest. Now, I can tell you the PCs thought this would be the toughest nut to crack of the 5 Scarborough ridings, and it proved to be. The NDP, Dolly Begum, is elected 45% of the vote in Scarborough Southwest. Federally, it's held by Liberal, the former police chief, Bill Blair. Gary Ellis, the PC, finishes second. In Spadina, Fort York, this is another riding that the downtown urban riding, right on the waterfront, that the NDP had to have. Chris Glover elected with 50% of the vote, defeating incumbent Han Dong, just notched 24% of the vote in Spadina, Fort York. Let's take a look at University Rosedale. This was one, and we heard Omar talk about this, where he thought the Liberals might need to take this to get to that Magic 8 seats. Doesn't look like it. Jessica Bell elected with 47% of the vote. Gillian Smith, surprisingly not about Gillian Smith, but the Progressive Conservative finishes second in University Rosedale, and Joanne Davis finishes, well, tied, I guess, but somebody's got to finish third in third place. So some great work by the NDP in downtown Toronto. They also have a win right now, looking to win in Ottawa Centre. So those are the good things for the NDP, but I think overall a bit of a disappointing night for the NDP. Alan and Farah.
So they may not need cabinet ministers, but they will need critics. Jessica Bell, as you mentioned, transit. She's been a transit advocate. She could go into the transport role in terms of being a critic. Let's go to Mark Carcasole, though. He's with Andrea Horwath. He's at Andrea Horwath's headquarters, not with Andrea Horwath, who I'm sure is not there yet, Mark.
That's right, Farah. She's not here yet. She's expected to at some point. You were talking about the NDP's shadow cabinet coming up in the next session at Queen's Park. One thing now is that they do have enough MPPs, it looks like, to have, a different MPP, a different shadow minister for each cabinet. The current session that we had a lot of people with multiple portfolios. Now, I'm here with Brad Levine. Brad Levine is an NDP strategist. Brad, I'm going to ask you straight out, what happened tonight? What happened here?
What happened was Andrea Horwath ran a fantastic campaign. She doubled the caucus, but it just wasn't enough. We'll have to figure out, where are those votes that could have come to us. But she should be so proud of the campaign she's run. For us, these results, while we didn't get there this time, we are poised to take on Doug Ford and the PCs in 4 years' time. We'll hold them to account at Queen's Park for now. But the other thing of note is that now the New Democratic Party is the alternative to the Conservatives in Ontario, and that is a very exciting thing for us. We've never been in that position in a couple of generations, and now we can coalesce that non-Conservative vote in the next election, and we'll get it over the line next time.
Is this still a party, though, that is haunted by the ghost of Bob Rae's reign? Every time I talk to voters doing stories, it's always, well, the NDP, we remember Bob Rae. Is that a specter that still haunts this party?
I don't believe so. For the first time in Ontario's history, there were more millennials eligible to vote than boomers. And those folks weren't even alive back then. So, no, it's not. This was an election where, again, we're going to have to look at these results in the next coming days. But, we wanted more Liberals to join us so that we could defeat Conservative candidates. And we're going to have to look at those raw numbers right now. But, without a doubt, I think Ontario sent parties a message. One, they wanted change. They're going to get change. They've given Mr. Ford a mandate, and congratulations to him and all of his candidates for that. But they also gave us a mandate. Now we're the party of the alternative to the Conservatives. We're going to build on that over the next 4 years.
Brad, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that. It's Brad Levine, NDP strategist, obviously seeing this as a good day for the NDP, despite the fact that they are basically losing to the PCs in a majority government. But they say this is something that can move ahead with in the future, maybe 4 years down the road. Back to you guys on the desk.
Okay, I'm sure the planning starts tomorrow. We want to talk about the numbers, especially for our friends on Global News Radio that are listening to us. PC's 74 now. There's 40 elected there. The NDP at 37, 25 elected. The Liberals leading in 8 ridings right now.
We're going to get more on those Liberal ridings in just a moment, but there's your popular vote by party. 40% for the PCs, 34% for the NDP, 19% for the Libs, 5% for the Greens, and with that 5%, they pick up a seat. Now, we're talking about tight battles for the Liberals, and here's one we're all watching tonight. Don Valley West, we have 60% of the polls reporting a narrow lead for Kathleen Wynne here. If she can hold on, she will be that all-important, perhaps, 8th Liberal seat.
Now, we want to talk about the big picture here. Eric Sorensen, you've seen him with that pretty cool map. He's in our virtual studio. Talk to us about the big picture, Eric, and how we got here. And look, you can see that divide, north and south.
Yeah, I mean, for folks that are listening on radio, we can tell you that Northern Ontario is quite colorful. There's orange and red and blue, and there's one gray. We should mention that's the new riding of Kiiwetinoong, much like Glengarry, Prescott, Russell over in Eastern Ontario, still in gray because there are a number of ridings that simply the polls were late in closing, and so we're not going to have results until later for those. But that's what Northern Ontario looks like. And if you can't see Southern Ontario, let's have a look at that. It is so blue, almost from Windsor. Not Windsor itself, Windsor and Essex and Windsor-Tecumseh, that's all NDP territory right down in the corner there. But after you get outside of the Windsor area, boy, from Sarnia and Lake Huron all the way across through Lake Simcoe and then up to the Ottawa Valley, you can see that it is just all blue, and it is an amazing turnout for the Conservatives there. We do want to show you one little piece of history because we just have to make note of this. In South Central Ontario, bring that out and let's have a look at this for a second. Look at that riding in the middle. That is the first Green, that's Mark Schreiner, first Green ever in Ontario. And there it is in the riding surrounded by Wellington, Halton Hills. That is Guelph and Mark Schreiner winning for the Green. They break through, and that will be very important to the Green Party. Let's now go back into Toronto, and we'll see again. This is where the Conservatives have really done so well. As David and Alan and Farah have been talking about, the NDP have a lot of orange in downtown Toronto, but the PCs broke through much of Toronto, down into the Don Valley ridings. The Liberals, we're talking about the Liberals, they're at 8. They need 8, at least 8, to retain official party status. And it is so close for them because they cannot count their chickens yet. Let's look at a couple of examples. One, we think, is in Scarborough-Guildwood. Yes, Mitzi Hunter for the Liberals, leading Roshnan Nalatanam. Look at the score, if you want to call it the score. Look at the votes. Two votes, 5,637 to 5,635. That's Scarborough-Guildwood. We may have one or two other examples. Okay, well, let's leave it at that then and go back to you guys.
Okay, thank you for that. That was 2 vote difference. That's incredible. We want to go to Crystal Gomensing. She is at Caroline Mulrooney's headquarters for York Simcoe, where we understand we're going to get the results a little bit later, Crystal.
Yeah, Farah, the results for Caroline Mulrooney will come in later. We had 2 locations with an incident here in the York Simcoe riding. So those school polling stations were actually shut down because of a police incident. So in one of the locations, people will be voting until 11:35. So things are going to be going for a little while. But I want to show you here, of course, that is Brian Mulrooney, former Prime Minister of Canada. He is here to support his daughter. Brian Mulrooney is, of course, shaking hands, obviously popular with the crowd. His daughter sitting in another room right now. Again, her results won't come in for a long time, probably one of the last ones to actually register because of that incident with 2 of those polling stations. Of course, a lot of cheers here at this location out at Silver Lakes Golf and Country Club. The PC majority led to a big eruption. Not only is Brian Mulrooney here tonight, but we also have Peter Van Loan, the MP for this region, here to support Caroline Mulrooney as well. I don't know if we actually have the cable to do this, but we're going to walk over here a little bit and see if we can actually jump into this conversation. Brian Mulrooney, Crystal Gomensing, Global News.
No,
what do
can't
you?
say a word.
No, but I am wondering. Doug Ford win.
Yeah,
I'll wait for Caroline.
You'll wait for Caroline. Obviously, very proud father right now. Those results later tonight.
Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you. So there we go. So he's here tonight, obviously in support of his daughter, not commenting at this point. A lot of nerves and a lot of people wondering what's going to happen. That was a little earlier on in the night. Right now, this is a very safe blue riding. It has been blue since 2007. The incumbent decided not to run again, but Julie Monroe did endorse Caroline Mulroney. So, you know, it's very confident riding. In fact, all you have to do is look at the banner when you walk in here, and the picture of Caroline Mulroney says MPP York Simcoe. So confidence here high, obviously a very jubilant crowd given the decision with the PC majority.
Okay, Crystal, thank you for that. And we'll be checking back with Crystal. But, you know, the former prime minister, he was quiet, but I'm sure he was giving his daughter a lot of advice. She's a rookie.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Crystal to go over and pigeonhole him again. I just go over and get him.
Yeah, he wasn't ready to talk, but I'm sure he will be later. Let's take a look at the numbers because I want to see those Liberal seats. Take a look. Now leading in 6 ridings. Again, 8. That's the number that the Liberals want. 8 seats, and we're not there yet, and none have been elected either. For our friends in radio, the PC's sitting at 74, leading and elected.
And there's your popular vote, 40% for the Progressive Conservatives. This is the popular vote province-wide, 34% for the NDP, 19% for the Liberals, and 5% for the Green Party. I want to talk about this riding. Burlington, Jane McKenna. She returns now to Queen's Park after her first winning election in 2011. And Farah, I just want to tell you this quick story. When she wins in 2011, she was a new MPP. And I did an interview with her where I said, you know, listen, Burlington has never voted anything in its history except for Conservative.
Right.
You're going to really have to screw things up to lose. And sure enough, in 2014, not that she was a bad MPP, but she lost.
You jinxed her.
And I've kind of always felt a little guilty.
You've worn it.
Like I was the one who jinxed her. Now she's returning to Queen's Park. The jinx is gone.
The jinx is gone. You feel a lot better?
I feel better. I feel better.
Yeah,
Weight off my...
Okay. We want to reintroduce our panel to you, our insider panels. In case you're just joining us here on Global News, we have Deb Hutton, who is a conservative strategist. We have Tom Parkin with the NDP and Omar Khan with the Liberal Party. Now, let's talk about populism. Okay, I know we've talked about this a little bit earlier, but what does today's win say about populism in this province and, you know, the Trump effect that some people will point to south of the border? Omar.
So Bill Clinton used to say you can have good government without good politics and good politics without good government. Sorry, you could have good politics without good policy and good policy without good government. I'm totally killing them. My point is...
He didn't say it like that exactly.
My point is, you have to combine good policy with communications that appeal to average voters. And Mr. Ford was able to do that. There's been Liberals that have been able to do that as well in the past. Jean Chrétien was the master at this. I think this is probably an area where we as Liberals in the coming months and years need to refocus our attention.
Well, what does the Ford family have to say about Mr. Ford as Premier? Here's Randy Ford.
Real exciting.
What was the energy like? Describe it.
Lots of energy. It's wonderful. He deserves it. So do the people of Ontario.
And why does he deserve it? Why do the people deserve it?
Because he's worked hard for it.
All right, folks, we'll see everybody at the Congress Center, all right?
So if you don't know the Ford family well from City Hall, you Ontarians, you're going to get to know the Ford family because with Doug Ford comes his family. He's very, very close to his family.
Yeah. And Randy Ford?
Not all of them are so close these days, but...
Be nice, Tom. It's election night.
I wanted to pick up actually on the discussion about populism because I think it's interesting. If this was Rust Belt United States and really southwestern Ontario is struggling with many of the same issues of industrial decline, struggling manufacturing economy. In the United States, we've seen this go entirely to Trump. Those kind of, not just the rural areas, but the urban areas as well. Yet in this election, because we have a Social Democratic Party, it appeals in London, it appeals in Windsor, it appeals in Sarnia, even though it seems like they may not be the winners in Sarnia. There is a significant vote because the affordability of everyday life is an issue for working class people. And if they get frustrated and angry, they vote populism. If there's somebody who comes with a rational plan to help them,
I'm going to give Tom's party some
credit. Tomorrow, the newspapers around the world are going to say one thing, and they're going to say Trumpism has come to Canada.
Right.
Is that fair?
And no, and they're wrong. Doug Ford spoke to affordability in a similar manner to Andrea Horwath, but with completely different policies. He said, your taxes are too high. The amount you pay for gas is too high. Your electricity bill is too high, and I've got a plan to fix it. That's affordability. That's middle class. And I think next time when we talk to Darrell Bricker, he will show us that the Ford coalition that's voting tonight speaks across all demographics, not just the traditional conservative voter.
And the Ontario Liberal platform had elements that spoke to affordability. We were talking about free preschool for all families across Ontario. That saves you $17,500 a year. A year. I think where we fell down in this campaign, or one of the areas where we fell down, is we weren't able to communicate that, for whatever reason, in a way that connected with ordinary Ontarians. So not people who read binders of policy briefing materials every day, not cabinet committees, but with the voters. Clearly, well, look, we're on the cusp of party status, so clearly something could have been done better. The elements of our platform actually were fairly solid in terms of speaking to issues of affordability, like free tuition, like moving the minimum wage up. You know,
we just want to interrupt you here, and we want to take you now live to Guelph, where Mike Schreiner, who is the first Green MPP ever to win in this province, is beginning to speak to supporters.
I want to thank Sandra for building and putting together such an amazing office that built the community that I wanted this campaign to be. I want to thank Candace, who's been there with me day in and day out for so many years. For so many years. Candace, I hope we've restored your faith in Guelph tonight. Finally, I want to thank somebody who started with me 9 long years ago. Somebody who I have the honor of calling a friend, a colleague, and a confidant, our campaign manager for the province, Becky Smith. You've been there with me every step of the way, Becky. There have been times when I've wondered if we would ever get here. And I've wondered if all the hard work was really worth it. But I knew that one day this moment would arrive.
We are now going to go to Brampton, where Jagmeet Singh and his brother Gurthan Singh are speaking. Here's Jagmeet Singh.
Working day and night on this campaign. An incredible riding and an incredible victory in this riding. The overall election wasn't exactly what we hoped for, but we showed some significant growth in areas we had never won before. We won in new ridings in Brampton, showing that the movement is strong. So without further ado, allow me to introduce your newest member of Provincial Parliament for Brampton East, Gurthan Singh! How's everyone feeling tonight? What an amazing night. I'm so humbled. There you go. I'm so humbled. This is such a beautiful, beautiful evening and such a beautiful, beautiful moment, because it demonstrates what people coming together can do. That despite all the odds, despite this looming fear of a conservative wave, Brampton held strong here in Brampton East. And not just in Brampton East, but in other seats across this city and other seats across this province, we've shown amazing growth for the NDP. And this would not have been possible without this amazing team. I think the best team in this country. You are fantastic. You are amazing. Make some more noise for yourself right now. You guys are fantastic. It also wouldn't be possible without my family. For my father, my mother, my fiancée Saphir. Give her some love. Give her some love.
Gaurathan Singh, who will be representing the people of Brampton East. You see him right now high-fiving his brother, who is the federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh. Now, let's go to Jamie Moraker. She's at Doug Ford headquarters. We saw Doug Ford leave his home. Let's see if he's arrived yet. Jamie.
Yeah, Farah, he has arrived on site. However, we haven't seen him just yet, but I know the crowd behind me, Ford Nation, they're extremely excited to see Doug Ford, who, of course, we have declared has taken a majority government. I'm joined now by former MPP Frank Cleese, a longtime conservative as well. Frank, you had said not long ago that you thought the online voting system would affect this, but it doesn't look like it has.
Well, you know, despite the voting system at the leadership, they've learned a few lessons. And the people of this province spoke loudly and clearly tonight. This is a great day for Ontario and for the people of Ontario. Doug is going to prove to be a great leader. And I believe the reason that we have the majority that we do today is because of his message. It resonated with the average person in this province. Their pocketbooks were starting to feel the effects of the former government. And the people of this province said enough. And they're looking forward to relief. Looking forward to relief from taxes, from the high cost of hydro. They're looking forward to better health care, better services so that we can improve the quality of life. The reason that I supported Doug Ford for the leadership is because he's a man of courage and knowledge. He has a heart for people and a mind for business, and he's going to bring that to the Premier's office. He has a great team behind him now, very competent people. Good days ahead for the province of Ontario. You mentioned his business there. There's been allegations that his own family business is failing. We also haven't seen a costed platform at this point. So do you believe Doug Ford when he says, you know, that he has that under control? And, you know, some people who did even voted for him, I spoke to the other day, said they're worried about the potential for cuts. Well, there's nothing to worry about. I can tell you what he'll cut are the scandals. He will cut the inefficiencies. I have every confidence in Doug Ford, and with regard to allegations, that's what they are. What Doug Ford is going to prove to the people of this province is that he will bring competent leadership. He will ensure that the people of this province are put first, that their interests are put first, and time will prove the voters today right. That's right, so we'll have to see with time. Thank you so much, Frank Cleese, former MPP and longtime Conservative. You could hear behind me the boos. There has also been cheers. It's a little rowdier than your typical headquarters, but like I said, Doug Ford is here. Ford Nation is ready for them. They're just excited to see him on stage and hear him speak for the first time since announcing this majority government. Okay, thanks so much for that, Jamie. Of course, we'll be taking that live once it happens. Take a look at this leading and elected board. The PCs are at 71, the NDP at 40, the Liberals at 9 still. Those are leading. Nothing
that has not changed all night. As you can see, that tells you just how close it is for any Liberal trying to win tonight. Even though we have 9 leading, none of them have been declared elected yet. 40% is the popular vote for the Progressive Conservatives, 34% for the NDP, 19% for the Liberals, 5% for Green. Check back in again on the Premier, Kathleen Wynne. She is the Premier after all and will be the Premier until she meets with the Lieutenant Governor. And right now, she is narrowly out in front. 70% of those polls reported. We're not prepared quite yet to declare a winner in that riding, but we are close to that. I think we can go now to Charles Sousa, the Minister of Finance, speaking in Mississauga Lakeshore.
I got involved because I wanted my kids to have a good start in life so that they can achieve the maximum amount that they can. I got involved because I wanted my parents to have the kids that they needed and the security with dignity that's important to them. And I got involved because I want all our families to have prosperity and achieve the best they can. And we have the lowest unemployment in 2 decades. We lead Canada in that growth, and we are investing heavily for them. My dad, when he first came to Canada and he arrived here, he said there's room for everyone. And there is, because look at the diversity that we have here and the accomplishments that we're making. He said there's room for everyone to learn and be at our best. But more importantly, he says there's room for everyone to help each other. All of you are involved in this campaign because you see the desire and the need to help others too. And I congratulate all of you for the work you have been doing all this while.
Okay, that is Charles Sousa, who doesn't look like he got his seat, even though Hazel McCallion endorsed him. Let's go now to Crystal Gomensing. She's at Caroline Mulroney's headquarters with a PC MP.
Yeah, thanks so much, Farah. I'm joined now by Peter Van Loan. He is, of course, the MP for this riding, very knowledgeable about the issues of this area, but also very involved with this PC candidates and really all of the candidates in this election. What is it that Doug Ford offered voters that really connected with them?
Well, for a riding like this, it's a perfect one for Doug Ford's folks because people here are hardworking, want to get ahead. They want government to get out of the way and give them the freedom to succeed. And he's that kind of guy who will speak up for folks who don't have a union representing them, don't have a special interest group, the ordinary person trying to make life better for their family. And that's someone who they sense Doug Ford is on their side. So I expect a good result here, as we've seen across the province.
Well, why did we have that connection? Because there's a lot of people that said he's a rookie, he's, controversial. There was the issue with, that just came up on Friday with the court document filings and the lawsuit. How did he break through?
Well, I think people saw with him a genuine person, and some of those things are to his credit, that in spite of them, in spite of what people may be throwing his way, he was still able to succeed. And I think people are going to find out that he'll lead a government that outperforms their expectations instead of one like we've seen federally, where it's underperformed their expectations. So I think that's one of the good news foundations on which Doug Ford is building. And I look forward to seeing that government deliver more than people think it will.
Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about, because you are on the federal side here, now we have a Ontario Premier who is a progressive conservative. We have a Manitoba Premier who's a progressive conservative. Of course, we have the Saskatchewan Premier who is a PC as well. What kind of weight does that now put on the national scale to have three PC leaders in the country?
Well, for the Federal Conservative Party, it's great, especially with some of the deep breakthroughs in Toronto and the GTA. That helps us organizationally on the ground. On an issues front, you take a look at things like the carbon tax, which is driving up prices of gas and the cost of living for everybody. Folks want to do their bit for the environment, but they know full well the Liberal approach with this carbon tax doesn't do anything to help the environment, but it sure is a big tax hit on them. And now you're going to have a series of governments that are opposing that. That builds strength for that position, and I think that the Liberals federally face a real challenge if they continue to advocate that the way to solve the problems of the environment is to tax hard-working families and make it tougher for them, force them to basically make choices. Do I take the kids to soccer? Do I go to work? What is it that I cut out, since Justin Trudeau wants me to change my behavior? Now you've got that issue frame changing a little bit, with another voice saying, guess what, we're on the side of these hard-pressed taxpayers and we're going to stand up for them.
All right, Peter Van Loan, thank you so much. Of course, we're all waiting to find out how Caroline Mulroney is going to do tonight.
Well, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic it will go well. All the ridings around us have done well. She has worked so hard. She's connected with this community. People love her here, and I think she'll do well tonight.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. MP Peter Van Loan represents that riding in Ottawa. Let's talk about the Ottawa area right now. We're going to go right to David Akin, who's zeroing in on close races in Ottawa.
Yeah, the National Capital Region, as we call it. And of course, one of the stories we're still following is, these 8 seats the Liberals are leading in. There's a lot of the National Capital Region. Now, this is one they've lost, and it's Yasser Naqvi. He was the Attorney General, largely seen by many as a potential leadership contender to replace Kathleen Wynne. He may yet, but he loses tonight to Joel Harden. The NDP is elected in Ottawa Centre. Federally, that's the riding of our Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna. Ottawa West Nepean, boy, hold on in this one. This has been back and forth all night. A very tight two-way, it was almost a three-way. Bob Chiarelli is in third place. He's the incumbent minister of infrastructure. Right now, Ottawa West Nepean is looking NDP. Chandra Pasma has 33%. Jeremy Roberts of the PCs has 32%. This was one of those ridings with a nomination problem with the Conservatives. That may affect this race. Let's go to Orleans. Now we're getting to French-speaking Ottawa, just across from Parliament Hill. Orleans right now, Marie-France Lalonde, an incumbent Liberal minister, 39%. It's close. She's up 4 points to the PC's Cameron Montgomery, who has 35%. So that's a close race, and I know Omar over here is Orleans got to have that. How about Ottawa-Vanier? This is a riding that's been Liberal since 1977, and Liberal almost invariably going back 100 years. Nathalie Desrosiers is leading 42%. She's got a good lead over the NDP. Lyra Evans, who has 30%, half the polls have reported there. Now, this is, I think, a shocker. A lot of people in Ottawa are saying Ottawa South could turn blue. Not right now. John Fraser leading. He's been elected. John Fraser has been elected 41%. Let me tell you what John Fraser did after Kathleen Wynne said, "I'm not going to win." Fraser started putting up signs that were black and yellow, didn't have the word Liberal on them, and said, "Vote John Fraser to stop Doug Ford." Looks like people in Ottawa South agreed with them. Alan?
All right, thanks very much. Obviously, that's, McGuinty territory, and the Liberals have held there. But also, you saw what David was just saying, Yasser Naqvi going down to defeat. There's somebody who had some aspirations and was thinking, if he could hold on, then he'd think about perhaps maybe going for the leadership. I mean, there's nothing that says he can't run for the leadership when you're outside of the party, but this is just such a decimation for the Liberals.
I got to interrupt you because I hear that Karen Lieberman, she's at Gurthan Singh's headquarters with his very supportive older brother. Karen.
Absolutely, and he is a very proud older brother right now. Jagmeet Singh, leader of the federal NDP. Congratulations, this is big for your family.
It's big for the city, it's big for Brampton, and for Brampton East to have someone like my brother who's been a passionate defender of all the issues that matter to this riding, to be able to be a voice for that fairness, for that justice. It's going to be something very important for the riding. I also want to say Andrea did an incredible job as leader, won in ridings that we'd never won in before, through the party, but more importantly, it's going to be a fierce opposition to this current new government.
Sadly, realistically, a bit of a disappointing showing for the NDP on the provincial stage. So can you speak to that, and also if this might have an impact on the federal NDP leading into 2019?
Well, one of the things that we can point to is there's been significant growth of the movement. The fact that we won in new ridings that we had never won in before, that we never held before. We retook ridings that we had not a presence for a number of years. So that's a positive sign of growth. The party increased its seats by almost twice, by double. So it shows a lot of movement, but it's not the results we would have wanted. We wanted to see a new Democratic government, but with Andrea as leader and the strong opposition, there will be a fierce opposition to some of the proposed cuts that the Conservative government's going to bring forward.
Jagmeet, appreciate it. Thank you, and again, congratulations to your brother. Back to you guys.
Okay, Karen, thanks so much for that. Let's take a look at those numbers again, and we want to see if that Liberal number's moved. Here's the leading and elected board, and there we have it. 2 Liberal seats have been elected, still leading in 6 ridings, and 8 is that magic number. So we're not sure if they've gotten there yet. For our radio friends, 71 for the PCs, 41 for the NDP, and of course that single Green seat.
And there's your popular vote by parties. We look province-wide. These numbers have not shifted a great deal in the last hour or so. The PCs sitting firmly at 40%, but then, as we've been discussing, if you add up all the numbers underneath there, 34% NDP, 19% Lib, 5% Green, you have more on the progressive side of the equation, but the way the Westminster system works, that 40% gets the Progressive Conservatives a majority government.
And a little fun fact here, the lowest popular vote to win a majority in recent history, Bob Rae's NDP in 1990 with 37.6% of the vote. Now, Andrea Horwath really tried to distance herself from Bob Rae. She hoped that would make the difference and get Ontarians to elect her. Did not work out for her tonight. We're going to go to Alex Pearson. She's at Andrea Horwath's headquarters with Global News Radio 640. Alex, I'm sure you have a long list of reasons, but why do you think the NDP didn't make it, didn't get to the showing they wanted tonight?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that the candidates that presented themselves might not have been the bench strength that people in Ontario feel comfortable with. I mean, it's good enough that Andrea Horwath is known, that people seem to like her, but at the end of the day, government is not just one person, and I think a lot of people were uncomfortable with saying, okay, we're in big trouble, we need change, but am I willing to take a chance on some of the candidates who are more activists? Now, oddly, a lot of those candidates who had made headlines in the campaign actually ended up getting elected. So it'll be interesting to see how they transition into Queen's Park and realize that some of their views may have to be toned down, and whether or not they can kind of bring it a little bit more to the center. They're still very celebratory here, and we're expecting Andrea Horwath probably to come in the next couple of minutes. We're starting to see some of the candidates come in. They did, in fact, do extremely well in Hamilton. They swept almost every seat except for one that was won by PC candidate Donna Skelly. So they have a lot to be very happy about in Steeltown, and they'll be well represented to fight over things like the tariff issue and that in Queen's Park. But like I said earlier, either way, they're a winner today because they are forming a fairly healthy majority, although analysts had said it would likely be closer to the 50 mark, but they did win in areas that they've never held before. Now the question is, can they bring themselves a little more center so that they can actually perform and you know, do what they're supposed to do with Doug Ford and his very strong bench, because that's really who they're going up against, and they have to be able to go into question period and knock them back and knock them down. Whether or not they've got that yet, we'll have to see.
We'll be watching. Thanks for that, Alex.
All right, well, let's talk to our insiders now, and I'm just looking at the Scarborough Guildwood number, and you just pointed this out to me, Omar. Mitzi Hunter there is up by, I count, 3 votes.
3 votes, and you know, in politics we all say GOTV. It means get out the vote.
Yeah.
This shows how important that is. A friend of mine, Jim Pimblett, is actually running the Get Out the Vote operation for Mitzi in that riding, and they've been working on their strategies for the last 2 weeks. And they didn't sleep last night. They were up until midnight or 1 a.m. This shows how important it is, and it shows how important it is to vote. This is a 2-vote margin. It could be the difference between party status and not party status for the Liberals.
There's another whole story in Scarborough. We've got Dolly Begum, I think, elected in Scarborough Southwest, which is important to the Democrats, but right now still not showing the other pickups that they'd hoped for. And again, it's a vote split situation. Some very tight races, 225 votes difference in Scarborough. Scarborough Rouge Park, the NDP is behind the PCs, and they're also narrowly behind in Scarborough North.
Yeah.
Scarborough Centre, 800, only 800 votes.
So all of those Scarboroughs seem very, very tight.
They are very tight between the PCs and the NDP, with the PCs just having those few hundred votes more that has put them over the top.
I'll interrupt you right now. Kathleen Wynne is speaking.
We are now switching to the new premier of this province. There he is, Doug Ford.
Right in front of me, Hazel, thank you. Thank you, Hazel McCallion, Mayor Hazel. Hey, Tony. Thank you so much, my friends. What a response. This is incredible. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will never forget the trust you put in me. My friends, this victory belongs to you. This victory belongs to the people. And tonight, the people of Ontario have spoken. People from every walk of life, from every corner of this great province, people from every political stripe, you have come together. Around one common vision of Ontario, you have sent a clear message, a message of hope and prosperity. A vision for the people of this province, a vision of a government that works for the people. My friends, a government that respects you, a government with integrity, a government that will always put you first. My friends, help is here. Our team will work every single day to deliver this vision. We will work every single day for a better Ontario, a better future, and a brighter future for our children. An era of economic growth and prosperity, the likes of which this province has never seen before. Prosperity that will benefit every resident of Ontario. And tonight, we have sent a clear message to the world. Ontario is open for business. My friends, I am so proud of the incredible team that you have sent to Queen's Park, a team of all-stars that will work for you. A team that will always put you first, and we are grateful to all of those who put their names forward, all of those who run under the PC banner. Thank you for your hard work and sacrifice. My friends, when we began this journey, I made a commitment to you. I made a commitment to Ontario. I promised to work hard. I promised to run an honest and positive campaign, to focus on the policies that matter to you. I promised to deliver a strong, stable majority government, and together we did that. Together we made history. We have taken back Ontario. We have delivered a government that is for the people. A government that will respect your hard-earned tax dollars. And my friends, the party with the taxpayers' money is over. It's done. But the work has just begun. Our team will get to work immediately. We will deliver on our plan for the people. We will bring accountability, transparency, and integrity to the taxpayers of Ontario. We will reduce your taxes, reduce your gas prices, and keep more money in your pocket. A plan to fix our economy and create good-paying jobs. A plan to invest in the priorities that matter to you. And my friends, together with our skilled team of MPPs, this is what we will deliver. My friends, I want to thank my family for all of your support and love and support. To my wife Carla, my mom Diane, and my 4 girls, you've been my rock. I couldn't have done this without you. And I can tell you, and I know that my brother Rob is looking down from heaven. Just getting chills talking about him right now. I know Rob, he is celebrating with us tonight. We owe so much to Rob's legacy. A legacy of service to the people. A legacy started by my father, Doug Ford Sr., and a legacy that will continue. I want to thank my incredible campaign team, the best political team ever assembled, ever. I can tell you, a skilled and dedicated team who worked hard and stuck together. And I want to thank the thousands and thousands of volunteers from all across Ontario. You left nothing, absolutely, you left everything on the field. My friends, but most of all, I want to thank each of you. I thank you. I want to thank the people of Ontario. I owe everything to you. Your support, your energy, your belief in our cause. You are the ones who kept me going, who energized me at every single stop, and reminded me what's at stake, what we are fighting for. You reminded me to stay humbled and stay focused. You are the reason we are here today. And those who didn't support us, I want you to know that I will work even harder to earn your confidence. I also need to acknowledge my opponents in this race, to Kathleen Wynne and Andrea Horwath. No, guys. No. You fought a hard, very hard campaign, and I'll tell you, Ontario is better for it. We have had our different approaches, but we all share in the same goal of a better Ontario. And I want to work together to deliver on our mandate, a mandate for the people. My friend, a new day has dawned in Ontario, a day of opportunity, a day of prosperity, and a day of growth. We're going to turn this province around so our children and their children will always be proud to call Ontario home. We will make sure Ontario is the greatest place on earth to live, to do business, and to raise a family. And we will make Ontario once again the engine of Canada. My friends, together in 88 short days, we achieved the impossible. We united our party and united our province, and this is your victory. Tonight is your night. I thank you, and God bless each and every one of you. Thank you. Thank you.
The new leader of Ontario, Doug Ford, 53 years of age. becomes the newest leader of Ontario and the first progressive conservative since Ernie Eves to lead this province, the first conservative since Mike Harris to win an election in this province. And you see him there being congratulated by his family. The 4 daughters coming up on stage. He called them his rock.
That's right. That's his wife, Carla, his 4 daughters, Krista, Kayla, Kara, and Kyla, and his mom there as well, the first person he hugged, as the confetti pours down on Ford Nation.
Our panel is with us here, and Supriya Dwivedi is with us as well. And what we just witnessed, I have never seen in all of my years covering politics. Kathleen Wynne begins to speak with her concession speak. She finishes third, and then she doesn't even begin, and Mr. Ford begins to speak. Normally, these things are coordinated, so that kind of thing doesn't happen. What happened here?
I don't know, and you're right. Usually you do try to coordinate it. It doesn't always work out that way, and I'm hoping it was just an error this evening.
So Kathleen Wynne, you know, whatever is happening tonight, she was the first female elected premier of the province of Ontario. She was the first openly gay leader of a province or a state in North America. I think she deserved to have one last evening on live television across the province. For whatever reason that was taken away from her, if it was a mistake, the Conservatives should apologize.
It seemed graceless to me. I find it stunning, Alan, and to think that somehow over at PC headquarters they don't have televisions on and knew that the incumbent premier was on TV, yet they walked right up and started. I mean, it defies credulity that they just thought that's also not a single mention of hospitals, healthcare, schools, teachers, nurses. This is a cuts agenda.
I mean, yeah.
Not a single mention of that important stuff.
Can we bring in Supriya Dwivedi? Supriya has joined us on our panel as well. And let me ask you, do you think this was done on purpose? Do you think it was an accident? How do you see this? You've worked on different campaigns on everything.
Yeah, look, I would really like to think this wasn't done on purpose. That, you know, implies a level of malice that I don't want to ascribe to any, you know, campaign, especially from a major party. I don't think we want to get off on that foot. But I agree with Omar and Tom that this sort of thing is usually coordinated to a much, you know, better degree, and it does imply, and this is what a lot of people were worried about with a Doug Ford-led province, is that we're going to see, and we're going to start to see the erosion of these political norms that we have. We sort of saw that at City Hall under late Mayor Rob Ford's
and visceral
mayoralty.
Partisanship, the idea that you're in a constant campaign. Conservatives, you won. You have a majority government for 4 years. You know, we want to work with you. Liberals want to work with you. I'm sure New Democrats want to work with you to get things done, to help you move, you know, agenda items that we can agree with forward. But come on, guys. This is a sitting premier of the province.
I mean, like you say, the optics of this are terrible.
I'm not going to defend the optics of it at all, but we're leaping to conclusions here that are completely over the top. Ford spoke about his opponents tonight. He spoke about those people who didn't vote for him, as most incoming premiers do. So to talk about political and conventional norms being thrown out the window, I don't think is fair.
He did say that to those who did not vote for me, I will work even harder for you.
Absolutely.
So that was certainly a nod to the majority of people in this province who did not vote for Mr. Ford. I can tell you that as we're looking here at Mr. Ford as he exits the PC headquarters of the party tonight, we are keeping our eye on the Andrea Horwath party. She is expected in a couple of minutes. For those of you upset that you did not see Kathleen Wynne, we recorded that. We will bring you Kathleen Wynne's speech. Obviously, we couldn't show it to you because Mr. Ford was speaking at exactly the same time, which is the issue that we've been talking about tonight. And as I can tell you that as we see Mr. Ford exiting and being congratulated by his supporters, Ms. Horwath should be up in any couple of minutes. In fact, we can take you now.
Andrea Horwath is now arriving at her headquarters in Hamilton. Let's switch to that now. There it is. And this is Andrea Horwath. She was hoping to walk in here as the new premier of the province. She's sitting now as the leader of the official opposition with 40 seats. You can see that at the bottom of the screen in our leading and elected panel. And she's walking in to applause. Let's listen in live.
That's part of her campaign team, and you can see them firing up the crowd. This is none of the people that we spent a lot of time on the bus with, and here is the leader herself. We are live at NDP headquarters. There you see Andrea Horwath making her way in, and just below her you see the tally on the evening. 75 seats for the Progressive Conservatives, 40 for the NDP, 6 for the Liberals, and 1 Green. Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party, my mistake, winning in Guelph tonight. Andrea Horwath being congratulated here. Obviously, this is not the result that she had hoped for. When I spoke to her the day before the vote, she said, you know, she brought in Michael Balagas from the Prairie Provinces as chief of staff